This is the July 9th, 2014 meeting of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. This is a continued public hearing on 92-140 Bronson Road, zoning compliance and coastal site plan application of Garden Homes Management pertaining to a proposed 95-unit residential development pursuant to Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. Yesterday was the first day of the hearing, July 8th. At the conclusion of the hearing, the applicant rested. In the meantime, overnight, there was submitted certain documents as part of the record by the applicant, as we referenced during the applicant's presentation. The 2010 Connecticut Fire Prevention Code, excerpts from NFPA, excerpt from Connecticut DOT, calculation of average daily trips, the email reference from Laura Pooley, and a police report from 140 Bronson Road. Correct? Thank you. With that, we will open the hearing to public comment. Again, I'll just remind everyone, you'll all have an opportunity to be heard. I would just ask that you keep your comments germane to the matters at hand. There is no time limit, but please try to be succinct. There are a lot of people who would like to be heard. We do have a curfew at 11 o'clock. It is our goal to finish up here tonight. If we don't, we'll have to continue to another day. If you are a member of a group and represented by either a lawyer or a spokesperson, you don't need to get up and reiterate what has been said already on your behalf. And with that, I'll ask if anyone from the public would like to be heard on this item.
My name is Mr. Chairman. My name is Joel.
I think the mic might be off. Perhaps.
You're not a professional?
Beautiful.
There we go.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my name is Joel Green. I practice law at Bridgeport, legal offices of Green and Gross, and I will be appearing this evening on behalf of the Lower Bronson Neighborhood Alliance. I have a rather lengthy presentation, and I'm planning on attending the balance of the hearing. However, I am aware that there are members of the public who were here last evening till the conclusion at 11 o'clock and are here. And I recognize it's a great burden on certain members of the public to be here. So what I would propose to do is yield for them, just for the moment, for members of the public, other members of the public who have the need to be out of here at an earlier time, and they won't have to necessarily sit through my presentation.
Well, let me ask you this: do you have any idea of approximately how long your presentation is anticipated?
I think it would probably be about 90 minutes.
90 minutes, yeah.
Or thereabouts,
Okay.
Potentially a little shorter or a little longer, depending on the nature of the public comment.
Sure. And so then if I could just have a show of hands, if you're not represented by Mr. Green, how many members of the public here are interested in speaking? So I think that makes sense to hear from the members of the public then. Okay? Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Sir, please, and when you come up, please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, I'm David Sturgis, 375 Warner Hill Road, Southport. Having sat through one evening of obfuscating testimony by the applicants, I believe there is one central issue for the Commission. Even by 830G strictures, this 94-unit project is too big for the site and poses obvious overburdens and dangers on neighborhood resources that resident tax dollars cannot bear. On the subject of affordable housing, it's now time for straight talk on this back to Hartford and to officials by Fairfield residents. The question is, how should we accommodate? The answer is yes, but within our proactive planning established, not reactive in the jam-fit scope current applicants are imposing. Neither the commission nor we should be hoodwinked by these out-of-town management corporations which, with justification ahead of their applications, are already subtly touting progress and demographic necessity in all the puff pubs extolling Fairfield as the place to live. They're only using 830G as convenient grand-scale leverage for more bucks, as their cunning smiles indicate. Once they have Stanfordized our skyline and moved on with their pockets full, we'll have lost our 375-year historical character for good. They'll succeed in doing what the British couldn't do in 1779, break our identity and will. Now, the character standpoint for the commission may not have had any judgment legitimacy to the governor's blue ribbon panel, the OPM operatives, and the legislature Solons who crafted this statute with good intentions 7 years ago, but to we Southport and Fairfield residents, it does. Contrary to what market applicants suggest, it's not population growth, money, style, or market trends that have created Fairfield's new desirability. It's rather the hard vigilance of past residents, my family included, to keep our town's character and fluid density for future generations to enjoy, as some present young icons, phenoms, and celebrities are finding out a bit slowly. Not even kayak ramps thrown in as a selling sop matter. In the case of this application, this kind of vigilance, your vigilance really, is needed now to prevent ruination on a 2.6 acre lot, too small, with inadequate service access along our historic and bucolic Mill River watershed as we seek to lift it out of contamination. This abutting property soil also remains infected through old sources and in need of more thorough testing. For that reason alone, this application should have been stopped by Conservation Inland Wetlands, but despite their staff findings, its leadership failed to see its river littoral stewardship through the buck-passing legal nitpicking overgrowth which lets permits slide by. As even 830G makes plain, the project has to be consistent with soil type, terrain, and infrastructure capacity, and it exceeds beyond all of this. When it comes to traffic, again, don't be hoodwinked. You can take it from this nearby resident of 7 decades. Bronson Road is a heavily used commuter suburban, not a rural artery. You should take into public safety account that it is also a local commercial truck traffic feed from 95 into Southport Center. You can stand along it every day and count them. And when it comes to sidewalks, the only sidewalk serviceable leading up to the Mill River Road crossing has buckled pavement and is half overgrown with weeds, trees, and poison ivy, hardly suitable to our mythical toddler walking back and forth to school. The density of these mini co-op high-rises as proposed here, we cannot handle and do not require for affordable housing in any neighborhood. Through you and with you, we need to tell these outside companies, all the spin doctoring by attorneys, engineers, and surveyors, that in our town, as in other fields of human endeavor, size, fit, and appropriateness matter. We can provide affordable housing within identified small single-unit lot grids. It should be part of a designed village district proposed long earlier for this specific area, the eastern edge of Southport and the western gateway to Fairfield. The Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation stands ready to assist the town in this effort, as well as all of us on the old Fairfielders Plan crew, which I'm sure some of the commissioners remember. Since workable land is scarce in this area, both the set-aside and the housing incentive zone options of the statute must be coordinated with an upgraded local plan of development. Since the site abuts both a key watershed and is near an historic district area, its future must conform to the proximity, not override, as the statute distinctly sets forth. With this flexibility, such a plan devised fits our heritage, and its tight regulation language can send a home rule message on 830G to Hartford and to Washington. And I hope the town hall, Mr. Tetro, Mr. Barnhart, Mr. DeBonchuk, can step up and get this framework in place for the commission. Everyone will then know before they apply that we have standards to meet, and as long as the predatory greed we've got going here doesn't push its envelope, it's an affordable housing and living win for everybody. Meanwhile, deny this application, and if it's appealed, we'll join you in assuming the burden of proof, defending the decision in court vigorously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before you begin, and I will call you next, I did notice, and I did forgot to ask, if there was any member of the public service, police, fire, or other emergency members of the public that were here to testify today. Officer in the back. Would you?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, make sure that we got that in timely.
Chivalrous is not dead.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you very much for coming. If you wouldn't mind just stating your name and occupation and for the record.
My name is Sergeant Bob Calamaris. I'm with the Fairfield Police Department Special Services Division, and I'm the supervisor for the Traffic Safety Unit.
Traffic safety?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Could you just give us a brief background of how long you've been with the force and
Sure.
what your duties are?
I promise you I won't be as eloquent as the last speaker, but I've been with the...
It's a tough act to follow.
I know. I've been with the police department for 15 years, and probably 13 out of that 15 have been in the traffic unit in some capacity or another. I specialize in traffic safety, speeding problems, analyzing traffic issues throughout town, in addition to traffic and crash reconstruction, with involving most of the time motor vehicle accidents. I'm the supervisor of the accident division as well as the traffic unit as a whole. So that's my background.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this parcel of land and that's subject to the application here?
I did not look at the proposed plans per se. I took a ride out to the site today. My supervisors asked me to go and take a look at it and kind of give it a quick assessment. I looked at not only, I think it's 140, and the other parcel is 92?
Yeah.
Is that it?
92, correct, yeah.
Just some of the issues that I saw were width restrictions. Right now, they currently have a driveway that I believe is 17 feet, according to my measurements, at the what looked like the catch basin. That catch basin then dumped out into a kind of a stream alongside of the throughway. On the opposite side, it looked to be wetlands adjacent to the railroad. I don't know what the,
Are you familiar with Officer DeMarco's statement?
I am.
Okay. What he wrote regarding the issue with the width and gravel driveway at the code meeting, myself and the fire department pointed out the fact that it may be too narrow for emergency vehicles access. What the proposal here is in the application is a 20-foot roadway. And most, in our regulations call for a 24-foot roadway minimum, two ways, 12 foot each way.
Right?
Do you see a situation where we might not be able to get emergency vehicles through this roadway?
In regards to Officer DeMarco's letter to you, I read it briefly, and his analysis of it was that even if we were to put signs there stating that, no parking or fire lane, there's still a possibility that people might violate the signs, which rarely happens in Fairfield, but there's a possibility that could happen.
For the record, you're being facetious.
For the record, I am being facetious. If someone were to park illegally, it would create an issue. The average width of a motor vehicle, if you said an SUV to be extreme, is about 8 feet wide. A smaller car, 6.5 feet. So if you took 8 feet from that 20, you have 12 feet left.
Right.
I don't know what the average width of a fire truck is, but I can imagine it's more than 8 feet or 10 feet wide. So,
In your experience with, multi-unit complexes such as the one that's proposed, it's 95 units. Do residents typically park in no parking areas or fire lanes?
there's a possibility that they could, I don't know what the traffic or what the parking or the proposed parking area will look like. If I had an opportunity to look at it a little more thoroughly, I could probably make a better assessment, but I guess my statement would be there's a possibility that it could pose a risk of law enforcement or public safety not being able to access the driveway.
Okay. What's also proposed is a 20-foot roadway with no sidewalks as well. Do you see that as an issue at all as well, going up to this property?
It's a lot of people that will be living there. I imagine it will be more of a commuter. Most of the residents that live there will probably be commuter. I mean, this is all hypothetical, but they'll also have time off where, there's a shopping center just adjacent to the railroad tracks on the other side. There could be an issue with pedestrian traffic traveling towards the post road.
Is on Bronson Road right there at the entrance, is that on-street parking there, or is that no parking zone?
I do not recall.
Okay. Any question?
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
That was my question.
That was your question?
All right. Of course. I think you need to use a microphone, unfortunately.
Okay.
Sure, just two brief questions. Could you elaborate a little bit about, you mentioned your superiors indicated, or how did you become involved in this matter today, both going out to the site and coming here? Who directed you to go out to the property and then to come here tonight?
Lieutenant Perez was unable to make it tonight, so he asked me to sit in for him.
And based upon any personal knowledge that you have, do you know who contacted or how Lieutenant Perez became aware of the matter and that led to you being asked to take a look at this?
I do not.
Okay. You've been 15 years an officer, and how long have you been heading up the traffic division?
4 years as supervisor.
Okay. Have you ever before been summoned by superiors to attend a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to testify about a pending application?
Absolutely.
Okay, and when was that?
Specifically, I couldn't tell you. I probably attended 8 or 10.
Do you attend code enforcement meetings?
On occasion, I do.
Okay, and you're familiar with the minutes of the code enforcement meeting from this session back in April, correct?
Not this particular one, no.
Or Officer DeMarco's participation in the code? Did you review those code minutes?
I did not review the code minutes, but we had some discussion about it.
Okay, thanks very much. You're welcome.
Thank you, officer.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Ma'am, you were up next.
Gaylord Meyer. I am RTM for District 1 rep. And I come here tonight because based on the presentation last night by the applicant and Attorney Fallon, many of my constituents emailed me today, as also prior, with really strong concerns about the safety of traffic. The location of the driveway and the 97 cars that are 97 plus a guest, just in case everybody has a guest, and then you have the delivery trucks, and then you have the service trucks, and then you have the cars, the motorcycles, the vans, people entering on from Bronson and also exiting onto Bronson is incredibly dangerous, being as close as it is to I-95. For example, if a third of the families that do move into this complex, maybe let's say a third of them have 1 or 2 children. Those children will be attending our local schools. What consideration has been taken into for these children to walk to Mill Hill School? Some of them may want to walk to the village or to the post road for transportation or to Southport. Clearly, last night, there was no provision for these people and applicants to come and go safely on Bronson Road. Also, it was noted that some of these children or adults may have special needs. There are no sidewalks entering or exiting, even when you get out to Bronson Road. That was not taken into consideration. The other consideration is many feel that this road is not wide enough and does not meet the town code. There has been discussion, what about snow plowing? What about emergencies? The great big double ladder that gets in there. To take that radius, I don't believe it can do it. I'm not an authority, but I hope we'll have one who will testify to that. What thought has been given to the tenants who want to use the transportation, the public transportation? How are they going to get there? Anybody who lives in Southport or lives on Bronson Road is fully aware that this is a highly traveled road. When the northbound or southbound side of 95 backs up, everybody gets off and they go around and they use Bronson Road to either access the Merritt Parkway going north or they go into the post road. We also have people who will get off the post road and head north on 95. To have that many cars added to the mix is very dangerous, in my opinion, and also the opinion of my constituents. I also would ask this commission, and would strongly ask it, have you been in touch with the Department of Transportation, I-95? How do they feel about this? Are they aware of, and I'm sure maybe Mr. Fallon has spoken to them, but I hope that they would come and speak to the commission and to the public about that also, being maybe 10 feet away from the entrance onto I-95. Based on safety issues and my constituents and I strongly feel that you should deny this applicant's. Also, I think also it was touched on, and I didn't address it, is that I had wished, because I too believe that we need affordable housing, but to have it in this kind of density in this location is inappropriate. I also think, and it is also the opinion of many, that there was not a lot of consideration given that Southport is an historic town, and they didn't take the seascape into the vision of creating this structure, which would become an eyesore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys can duke it out.
Take my hat off, sorry.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name's Dan Shine. I live on 648 Bronson Road. I'm a citizen, I'm a resident of Bronson Road. I'm about 13 houses from where you're gonna propose to build this. I have 5 minutes or less, because I don't wanna blow everybody else's time. And I'd like to, if I can, just grab those easels real quick.
Of course, yeah.
And two, thank you. I'm gonna try and put them, and I'll leave them up if later you wanna.
Please don't place them there.
Okay.
On the left side of the podium.
Left side?
No, on the podium. Just at the podium. Thank you.
He has a camera that's trained on the...
What I'm gonna do is I'll face the others and then hold them up for you too.
Okay.
I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
I have 2 exhibits here, and I'm not a professional marketer, but I have 2 exhibits here that I feel are important to tonight. Right now, Patty is my wife. She's facing, and I'm going to start with this. This is handed in as a copy of the survey handed by the folks at 95. This is the survey that went along with it. Now, if all
If-
you
if-
can see, I
You have to use the microphone.
Gotta use the microphone.
Yeah.
You're on television.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is the survey handed in with the application. Okay, it's done by a licensed surveyor. Being a builder, I can read one of these. I've been a builder since 1974, and so I can probably read this because I have to do it all the time. If you'll notice, I use 2 colors. Blue for water, brown for dirt. Keep it simple. Okay? What we have here is the property, as alleged on the documents at Town Hall, is 2.9 acres, I believe. Part of that property, I think Mr. Fallon will agree, if he's unsure, he could check the record, is subaqueous, which is a nice word for underwater, I believe. This document, handed in by Mr. Fallon's group, shows approximately, I don't know, you could take a seat of the pants, say maybe it's 1/5 of it's underwater. We've heard that expression before. Unfortunately, the water that it's under happens to be very important water to the U.S. government. The Superfund cleanup site, which Mr. Fallon read into the record last night, you were the attorney for Exide, is that correct? Or one of the attorneys?
If you could direct your comments to...
Sorry.
You're correct.
Okay.
He did represent that.
Then he should be aware of most of this a lot better than me. I have in my hand a copy of the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and this was written up last year at a meeting I attended at Ludlow, I believe, in which they purported the cleaning of the river. Right now, Mr. Fallon's clients own a portion of that river according to the title deed. The subaqueous land is on the Superfund cleanup list. It is denoted as Area 1, kind of like Hiroshima has an X where the bomb landed. So to describe the problem we have with the water that Mr. Fallon's client is about to purchase with the land, and you, I think Mr. Wagner noted it last night, was there's an edict to clean it up. And in him assuming the ownership of that property, he assumes that edict. It supersedes the previous owner and is carried onto his shoulders. What I find absolutely abhorrent, being a man that agrees with 830G, and most of the people I've spoke to agree a need for lower and moderate income housing in town, is taking 95 units and placing it on an uncleaned up Superfund cleanup site that is in the hot 100 when I spoke to a friend who works in DC. This site is known to be in the top 100 cleanup sites in the United States for pollution. It owns high contents of lead, which kill your brain, cadmium, chromium, and a host of other heavy metals. And I won't get into the medical technology, but basically finding out more and more the destruction of your brain is due to heavy metals, from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, to name a few. So we're going to take 95 units, put it on an uncleaned up, Superfund cleanup site that the federal government says is abhorrent. We're in the process of 30 years trying to get it done, and we're going to put 95 units with 2 people in there, or 4, or however many go into the 95 units, right in the middle of a Superfund cleanup. Now, I don't know about you people, but I find that very unhealthy and distasteful, okay? I had suggested, I have made a copy of this. The next diagram I want to show you briefly, I'm going to have to reach out. I feel like the lady at the boxing thing holding up the numbers. But this is a picture, and I'm going to hand out a few more later, of Area 1.
Sir, do you have copies of the items that you're referring to?
I have
I'll get them. You keep talking. You keep talking.
handed out to the crowd.
That's great, is that we can look at that while you're talking.
Yes, and I would like to, if I can, give Mr. Fallon, so he has that advantage, and the other attorney,
Yes.
a copy of what I have, including the committee. If you could, hand these out. The beauty of the document that Patty is handing out now, it's made for the common man. The pictures you have in front of you are Area 1. Mr. Fallon's client is about to, in this proposal, purchase Area 1, one half of it. In my understanding of title law, and Mr. Fallon will clarify for me, he owns half of Area 1 or a large portion of that subaqueous land. He also owns the duty to clean it up if he purchases that property. This is from both the U.S. government and the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection, and it's very simply laid forth in the 41 pages you have before you. In there you'll find lead contents in the soil and also chromium. All of those destroy your brains and do other neat things to you, causing cancer. You'll notice also he has red, orange, and yellow all on their property they're about to purchase. Please consult this map in front of you. That subaqueous land is Area 1, up to the middle of the river. Okay? I have those for handouts for them and for you on the committee and for the audience to pass around. Okay, finally I want to wrap it up so I don't bore you. There's a lot of intelligent people in the audience who still need to speak. I am pro 830G. I think a large portion of the people are pro 830G. We want to see low and middle income people get housing. What we are against is very clearly why we moved to Fairfield in the first place. We don't want high-rise, high-density, or high-profit developers taking advantage of poor people. And I suggest a very simple solution to the high-rise, high-density approach that lines the pockets of very few and packs people like sardines at P.T. Barnum and the like, that we propose that we put for every house that's over 4,000 square feet, a small portion of the lower level, 550, 750, like this gentleman has proposed, to be dedicated to low-income housing within that property. If the man's wealthy enough to purchase 4,000 square feet, he's probably okay with dedicating a portion of the lower level for his house for low income, whether it's his mother-in-law, God help him, or, excuse me, she's not here, or it's for his nanny or for the worker who's helping him on his yard. I don't care. But that way each house brings one low income with it. That we will constantly, with each family bring a low-income person into the town. There's a thought. I'd like somebody to chew on that so that we don't need to build New York City in Fairfield because somebody in another place and time decided we should. So that's about, I think, all I have to say, and we have handouts for this. Please don't let them build on a Superfund cleanup site that's not clean. That's,
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lauren O'Brien. I reside at 104 Edison Avenue, and I'm an RTM rep in District 5, and I'm also on the Public Health and Safety Committee. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time and your service to Fairfield. Your decisions to safeguard responsible development in Fairfield are critical and will impact our town for many years to come. Applications for apartment buildings that are large and denser than we've been accustomed to are suddenly proliferating. Developers are coming to Fairfield interested in helping us with affordable housing, a multifaceted challenge that places public health and safety paramount. The right project in the right location is critical to the project's success and the long-term appeal of our community. It would be speculative for any of us to project potential renters for this or any project. But I think we can all agree, young people, recent graduates, persons with special needs or disabilities, hardworking families with income qualifications, seniors that are downsizing or low income can all be candidates for this type of high density housing. For all the latter groups, Fairfield wants housing stock that offers a safe and good quality of life, proximity to town services and amenities, in addition to the opportunity for maximum integration into our community. None of these are provided at this project proposed on Bronson Road, located between the Metro North Railroad tracks and I-95. As a town, as our Fairfield baby boomers age, the demand for appropriate senior housing will increase to meet the needs of a changing population, exemplifying the need for ample handicap units and handicapped parking spaces. Where does this leave us if we continue cutting back on zoning requirements to an absolute minimum? Then where are we as a town as we grow and change? How will we meet the needs of our changing population? I understand the need for high-density housing in Fairfield, but not at the expense of public health and safety. I urge you to consider the multitude of safety issues associated with the proposed building project at 92-140 Bronson Road and deny the application. There's 7 reasons that I'll highlight. And the handout that I gave you, the last 2 pages, there's a lot of depth. I'm just going to top line to save time, and at your leisure you can look at the last 2 pages. Each of the following issues poses a significant safety concern for residents of the building and others in the community. It's a dangerous location at the entrance ramp for I-95. This is a high traffic, fast traffic area where people are gearing up to get on the highway. It's not a safe situation conducive to residential traffic entering and exiting private property or safe for pedestrian traffic. Pedestrians are at risk due to lack of sidewalk and crosswalks. Our town engineer wants sidewalks along the driveway, and I agree. We need sidewalks for safety for our residents. Seniors will be out walking for exercise. Young professionals who will be taking the train potentially into New York will either have to get dropped off or walk to the train station because there's a multi-year waiting list for a parking pass. Children attending middle school will be walkers. They are not bused. It's about a half a mile. They will need to cross Bronson Road. It's not safe right now for children. 3, inadequate parking and spillover parking spaces are unsafe. Last night we discussed proper versus adequate amount of resident parking. given that there's no safe alternative spillover parking accessible, all needed parking must be provided safely on site. Bronson Road does not offer that. There's insufficient handicap parking. This goes back to the aging population here in town. There's only two handicap spaces provided. It's insufficient. Particularly given that these apartments will also be marketed to seniors. No additional space is available, the way the plan is laid out, to create new spaces. So I ask you, what happens when a current resident, or several, qualify, due to health reasons, for handicap parking? That's a larger space. Where is that space going to come from? If it's already so packed, there's no additional room to grow this property. The driveway width is too narrow. It's proposed at 20 feet. It's far narrower than our engineering staff believes is generally necessary for safe and effective access to the building. Such a narrow two-way access road seems particularly dangerous and argues even stronger for a wider width of at least 24 feet. And again, more detail is on the last 2 pages. I just don't want to belabor it right now. There's questionable safety to the topography of the driveway, particularly in the winter months. The driveway's height drops 4 feet within the first 80 feet of the driveway. This very significantly will channel water from Bronson Road down the driveway, creating a dangerous condition, particularly in winter. After a snowfall, it melts, it then freezes at the lowest point, on an already too narrow active driveway with pedestrians. 7, and lastly, parking. The parking lot egress is dangerously narrow and poorly designed. I fear that safety considerations appear to be a secondary concern to this project. The project has packed as many parking places as available in the allotted area, with too few handicap spaces. So for those 7 reasons and the other information I have tabled, I thank you for considering what I've had to say. I'd like you to think it over, listen to what the other residents in the community have to say about the safety of this apartment building. And again, I urge you to confidently deny this application on the grounds that it creates unsafe conditions for the apartment residents and the Fairfield community at large. Thank you.
My name is David Thornton. I live at Twin Brooks Lane. I'm going to be real brief. Everyone before me kind of mirrored what I was saying, but I had some time today. So I measured my street, Twin Brooks Lane, dead-end street, 12 houses, 30 feet wide. When we had the incident with the bomb guy on Bronson Road, we had a lot of activity in the street. People were parking. You couldn't get by. That's a one-time thing that happened, but things do happen. When the garbage truck comes in my street and people park in the street, it's very constipated in there, at least on my street with 12 houses. So I do think, and I'm speaking just as a resident, that the little bit I know about this project, I'm very cool on it. So I hope you do the right thing and you really give it some serious thought. There's a horse for the course, is an old saying in racing. This is not the horse for the course. So thank you very much.
I don't see anybody trying to claim the podium.
Thank you.
I'm Carol Pontrelli. I live at 287 Partridge Lane. I'm on the RTM District 9 for this district. I'm actually going to read a statement by a constituent who could not attend, who wanted this statement read in this forum. So I will read his statement. It is by David Downey. He lives on Warner Hill Road.
This is the same email we have,
Dear TPZ Commission and its chairman, Matthew Wagner, the proposal to construct a 95-unit apartment building on Bronson Road presents, in my view, significant potential to exacerbate existing environmental and flooding issues and possibly to introduce new ones. I write as a citizen of Fairfield, not in my capacity as a specialist in the environmental policy and former director of Environmental Studies at Fairfield University, 2008 to 2014, and former Associate Director of the Graduate Program in Climate and Society, 2004-2008 at Columbia University. Thus, the views expressed are my own. Constructing a 95-unit apartment building on 92 and 145 Bronson will require activity that would likely stir up toxic contaminants in a Mill River tributary and watershed. Any heavy metals and other toxic contaminants embedded in the tributary and perhaps soils in the area are more likely to enter into local waterways, to impact local wetlands, and to enter into the local food chain if there is construction on that scale on that site. In general terms, such activity should only be allowed when necessary to protect human health or to achieve a compelling public interest. This does not appear to be such a case. In addition, the size of the structure and the surrounding pavement will remove the natural absorptive capacity present in the existing site. The removal of trees, brush, and soil would likely exacerbate local flooding issues and eliminate the role of the natural system plays in filtering water before it enters larger wetlands. The Mill River or Long Island Sound. The increased use of fertilizer and pesticides that will likely result from a large-scale apartment complex will run off via the pavement and sewers into local tributaries and probably direct into the Mill River, potentially harming local wetlands in the river. The huge increase in the number of cars and people in such a confined area so close to wetlands and a tributary and the Mill River itself would lead to more oil, gasoline, plastics, and refuse entering directly into the Mill River or directly through the sewers. Finally, given that the building would be expected to stand for 100 years or more, consideration must be given to future scenarios regarding local and coastal flooding. Given its planned location, a sort of natural drainage area for the hills and roads nearby the apartment complex would very likely be exposed to an ever-increasing risk of flooding from rainstorms. Indeed, an aerial view suggests that the Mill River might seek to spread in the direction of the planned complex during times of flood. Equally important while not immediately adjacent to Long Island Sound, the location of the property is immediately adjacent to the Mill River, which is connected to the Sound. The global scientific consensus in the 2014 IPCC report is that sea levels will at least 3 feet over the next 86 years. Actually, this doesn't make sense what I'm reading. But it's basically saying that it'll increase over the next 3 feet over the next 86 years. And many experts consider this a low estimate. At high tide during a regular storm, let alone a repeat of recent huge storms, the site might see, and indeed some would argue would absolutely see regular flooding within the expected lifetime of the proposed building. Nearly all the conservation, coastal flooding, and wetlands preservation guidelines of which I'm aware recommend not building large infrastructure in areas so prone to future coastal flooding. This project also has the potential to negatively impact air quality in the area, as it will lead to a significant increase in cars in an area already prone to significant congestion on the post road, but without space to put in more or wider roads. The increased traffic congestion in that area might also impact traffic near Mill Hill School, creating safety issues. I appreciate the work of the TPZ Commission and how you serve our town without financial compensation. Such service is a bedrock of sustaining our democracy. Best regards, David Downey. Thank you for letting me read that.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ellen Jacob, District 9, also RTM for this district. First, I want to sincerely thank the Plan and Zoning Commission before us, under the leadership of Chairman Wagner, who is kind and judicious, for the exemplary
Thank you.
manner. You're quite welcome. It's very sincere, and I know it's difficult at times. For the exemplary manner in which you are conducting these hearings, with members asking important questions, each from various perspectives, and working together to drill down to facts. You are a gold standard for the rest of us in town government. I mean that sincerely. Listening last night to the applicant's testimony, I was left with these impressions, and I think we all basically heard the same things from the comments before me. Their repeated mention of State Statute 830G seemed an attempt to escape uncomfortable questioning. As time went on, it became a catchphrase and even a veiled threat, alluding to the presumption that any denial by our Town Plan and Zoning Commission would be overturned by the courts on appeal. It's a neat way to dismiss the importance of this commission and skip over real scrutiny of actual facts. One wonders why any business enterprise would go through such great expense and trouble to force down the throats of neighborhoods unwanted high-density housing in the first place. Thorpe Street in my district last year, Bronson Road tonight, and Berwick-Fairchild on the other side of town just before this application. Is Garden Homes driven by a burning desire to advance the cause of affordable housing? Or is the real goal to turn a nice profit by exploiting a flawed law which towns throughout the state are working to repeal or work around? Is it to pluck the tax advantages of deed-restricted units while using one-year leases to attract a high turnover of transient market-rate tenants for whom rents can be raised annually? Hence the need to cram 95 units of renters with families, roommates, visitors, and cars into 2.7 acres on the peaceful shores of the Mill River. From last night's testimony, it would seem the applicant is no more a champion of affordable housing than I am of hair straightening products. How much does Garden Homes really care about their affordable housing tenants? Speakers before me have alluded to the same things. It's really hard to believe that a project of this magnitude would have no impact on traffic congestion, parking access, and pedestrian safety for tenants, but that's what we heard last night. That a two-lane emergency access road well under the recommended size of 24 feet by 50 feet would protect the health and safety of building occupants, especially in a snow or downed trees scenario. That there were no accidents from I-95 and local traffics in the area, when two Bronson Road residents exclaimed last night, sitting next to me, that there were accidents that they and their neighbors could recall. That sidewalks were not necessary for pedestrian safety of a tenant population who would choose this location in part because they could walk to the train, to schools, to stores, and the downtown green. That overflow parking would not spill into Bronson Road and Mill Hill neighborhoods in which there is limited parking available. That the architect cared much, it was hard to believe, about fitting the new structure beautifully into the natural surrounds when he described them as railroad tracks and highway entrance only. As a Southport resident, it was impossible for me to believe that Southport was a rural location rather than part of an already dense suburban town, or that Mill River had no recreational uses for the community when, for hundreds of years, it has been a happy site for swimming, small boating, fishing, and walking. I urge you to deny, and I am also going to submit this along with a statement from Virginia Sanford, Catherine Montgomery, and James Wickersham. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Gates. I live at 625 Bronson Road. I've lived at the property for 9 years, and I'm a licensed landscape architect practicing in Connecticut. There are so many things that have been said tonight that I agree with. I don't want to be too repetitive, but I do also want to bring a little bit of voice of the everyday life of Bronson Road. I am a mother of 3 boys, 6, 4, and 9 months old. I have a kindergartner at Mill Hill School, and as a mother of 3 children, I travel Bronson Road. That stretch between, I'm a quarter mile from the proposed housing development. I travel it 12 times out of my driveway a day, at least. People fly down that road. They drive way too fast. There is major congestion in the morning. It backs up from the stop sign at the proposed development all the way back to the 95 on-ramps where I'm waiting. I grew up in Fairfield, and I've seen the growth of Fairfield, which I'm very proud of, but I've also seen this growth that's starting to take its toll on the residents here. Namely, one example is the Mill Plain intersection at Post Road, which has now become so congested since the Sportsplex has gone in that people avoid it. You go to the Mill Plain intersection, you have to wait 3 rotations to get out to the Post Road. I'm now seeing this after 9 years at Bronson Road. People are taking our road to get down into Southport Village or out to the Post Road. And there is such congestion there in the morning. I'm trying to get my kids to school or go to work, and it's getting worse. If we add a 95-unit housing development, I really feel that the traffic will increase dramatically. I think that the safety has been touched on so much already. I'm sure many of the other residents can point out that one pickup truck that is parked on the side by the houses right adjacent to the proposed development that's often there. And when you're coming from Southport Village, you have to swerve around that pickup truck to get down around to the on-ramps or to our homes, and it's very dangerous when you're swerving around that car. There is not room for overflow parking on that area, and it's a huge concern of mine. I have seen people walking on that sidewalk. If people start crossing that road at that bend, I'm going to be very, very nervous about coming around that corner if there are people crossing it constantly. And it's a big concern for me. My child wants to be a walker. We can't be a walker. But if there are children in that development, I think it's a really big problem. As a designer, I would like to speak to the developer about the landscape site plan, which I think had very little thought to it, and I would hope that the commission would request more thoughtfulness to that. It was unclear if they're going to be clear cutting the trees. So when you come down Bronson Road, are we going to be looking at this giant building? What kind of screening is it? I think they need more attention to that in particular. And what are we going to be looking at? Because I don't want to be looking at a giant building. It will depress me every single day to look at this building when I'm driving down it. And I just want to say 2 more things about this. Aside from the Mill Hill, we've touched on that, my children going there. There are already kids in temporary classrooms. They have to walk outside to get to their classroom. We add more kids to this school. Who knows what's going to happen? They were supposed to be temporary, and now they're permanent, and that's upsetting to me in its own right. And lastly, I would like to talk about Southport Village. I grew up in Southport Village. I have a family that grew up in Southport Village. I've seen the village change. Some for good, some for bad. I'm very concerned about this high-density unit coming in and adding more congestion to the village, and I think that it's the job of the commission to protect what is a special gem of Fairfield. Southport Village is something we must protect, and we need to think about how we're developing around it and what's going to happen to the quaintness of that village as we start adding more and more numbers. And we've already had a lot of additions to Southport Village. I want to share it with everybody, but we have to be careful about what we're doing. And I just hope that you'll consider all those things. All right, thank you.
My name is Janine Alianello. I live at 472 Mill Hill Drive, and I'm going to touch a little bit on what she just said. I live directly across from Mill Hill School. So here's my road, there's the school. I am a mother of 2 girls. They were here yesterday, 11 and 9. They're very mature. They have never walked to school by themselves. On a few occasions, I let them cross. I watch. It can take up to 2 to 3 minutes to watch 2 little girls dodge cars. No one stops for them. There is no sidewalks. And I'm a mother who's watching them. Bronson Road is a main road to Mill Hill School. When I contacted the Board of Education, the Director of Operations told me the last traffic study done for that school was the year 2000. I think we're in year 2014 now, and the school's pretty crowded. What traffic study was done by the man who doesn't know where the nail salon or the post road is to discuss the impact of our school? Question, how can you measure the impact in public safety if we don't have experience with a high-density apartment building in less than a mile up a school district where kids are supposed to be walking? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Linda Snellamore, 442 Bronson Road. Why does Mr. Fallon think that we're against affordable housing? I'm not. I think this is a terrible location for this kind of density. It's right at the entrance of the ramp for I-95, which is very heavily trafficked, and people rush onto it at that point. It's between the train tracks and the highway and the polluted Mill River. Remember, the property goes halfway into the river, so I can't imagine it's not polluted. There's only one entrance and egress, and there can be no other possible entrance since the property is landlocked. That means fire and emergency vehicles have only one way to get in and out, and they'll be fighting against the residents who are trying to get out at the same time. Right now, try and get out of the property at rush hour, morning or afternoon, and you'll wait for about 20 cars to rush by you onto the highway. If you allow this to go forward, you're going to have 30 or 40 cars backed up into this property in snake fashion trying to get out. I've heard the very obvious threats of a lawsuit or an appeal if the town denies this. I'm appalled that this is allowed in hearings. I'd be curious as to where Exide is in this whole process. Do we think that they're going to want to clean up the developer's mess in the Mill River? Obviously, the land is polluted on the shore, and who knows how far into the property. The developer was not asked to do further testing, so we will never know. I guess I just hope that the commission denies this and realizes that if it goes to appeal, we'll all support you.
Thank you.
My name is Stephen Stout. I live in Southport and have done for 24 years. I want to talk on some things that haven't been brought up just yet. One is, of course, how is it not a public safety issue when there are no sidewalks proposed to be part of the driveway in to this property? Children will be waiting for buses, not just for Mill Hill. If that isn't a bus application, there are easily, potentially, middle school children, private school children, high school children, all of whom will need to be bused from there to their schools. In Bridgeport, special schools around, etc. So to think that that is a safe place is unrealistic. I've cycled through there a lot. I'll get to that in just a second. To me, that area, that sidewalk crossing the street at that very juncture, as Mr. Fallon suggested last night, is absurd. Without stopping traffic and having people wait for children or other people to cross there, especially at the commuting time of going to school in the morning. Southport is a walking village. I think everybody in this room knows that. Everybody walks a lot in that village. If people living at this place, the 95 units and the 113, 16, 200, whatever the cars are that are there, want to go south on I-95, where will they go? They will turn left. They will go up to the Mill Hill cross. They will either go out to the post road and try to get on I-95 on Crystal Brands, if it's not called that anymore, pardon me, but it used to be called Crystal Brands, and then go right up out. Or, as is often the case in this village and in this town, we're all rats in a maze. We figure out the shortest way to do it. They will go through the village, all the way to Center Street, turn right, and turn left onto I-95 by doing that. That will create more traffic health issues in Southport Village, without a doubt, in terms of volume, people wanting to get on the thruway to go south and wanting to get to work on time, which generally means they drive faster than they should. I think we can all agree on that. New this summer is a cycling path. Bronson Road has been designated, as I suspect most of you know in this room, a significant cycling path in the town of Fairfield. Both directions on Bronson Road, with healthy-sized stencils of cycling and arrows pointing in both directions. This creates a lot more traffic. It is diverting cycling traffic from elsewhere in the village, in the town, to make it a safe place for cycles to go to, which is a good thing, I think, for people who like to recreate in that way. It also means more traffic and more interrelation with people, cycles, and cars. Like it or not, cycles are here. They are not going away. They're only going to become more there in our face, both dealing with pedestrians and cars, and we have to work together to share the road. That cycling path is not going to be gotten rid of. It's going to stay there. And that is an issue, a public safety issue, because I'm sure our traffic gentleman did not count cycles when he did his study. Because of the, in my opinion, underestimated amount of cars predicted at this property, how do people who live here and don't have a vehicle get around? Where do they walk? How do they walk? Many of them will want to go to, I assume, the Southport Public Railroad Station, going up or down the line. So that will be more walking traffic. Make no mistake, with 95 units, there are going to be a lot of people commuting out of Southport Railroad Station. And if, as they say, they don't all have cars and they won't all be driving, what will they be doing? They will be walking, in all likelihood. And that is more public safety. Please deny this, please. And please, let's put something smaller in that place and let's build affordable housing in Fairfield.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
You're good.
Sorry, Joel. Brenda Kupchik, state representative for this district, and I'm not going to speak specifically about the project. I'm just going to speak a little bit about 8-30G, because it's been brought up a lot, not just on this application, but quite a few applications throughout the town. And it seems that over the past several years, we've kind of been under siege with these high-density developments. And we're trying in Hartford, and it's kind of an unusual situation because it's not a partisan issue. It's really a urban versus suburban legislator issue. And colleagues on both sides of the aisle, including myself, have met every beginning of session to sit down and talk about legislation to try to protect our communities. Because, with all due respect, 8-30G is being used to overdevelop communities to make money for developers. That's exactly what it's being used for, because if you look at the statistical evidence, it is not growing affordable housing in Connecticut in the manner in which it was intended. And we have talked at length about this issue over the last several years in the legislature, about how we can modify 8-30G that would actually produce more real affordable housing in the state of Connecticut. But it's become this sort of, tightrope between the two communities, because the urban legislators don't really want to listen to the suburban legislators because they think we're all anti-affordable housing, which we are not. So I would say to you that I think you should judge this project based on what you think is right for our town, safety and everything else everyone has said, and not based on a threat for 8-30G, because I think we need to do what's right for our town. And you should do what's right for our town, and we will continue to fight to try to change this. So it really would produce more affordable housing that's appropriate and doesn't destroy communities like Fairfield. Thank you for your time. Sorry.
Carol Way, RTM District 5. I was late getting to this meeting because I was at a Habitat for Humanity meeting, community bridge builders. And I have worked with Habitat and AmeriCare's Homefront and Interfaith Housing for more than 20 years. I've also lived in Fairfield for 35 years. So I remember Father Panic Village, and I remember the Pequannock projects, high-rises where people are stuffed into a very small area of land, and it certainly is not the kind of thing that is being built even in Bridgeport any longer. To me, this proposed project is really and truly a windfall for the developer, rather than being a truly affordable, good affordable housing kind of project. We can look at Reef Road and see what we did there with creating certain homes by Operation Hope and having Operation Hope run those homes. I represent a district in Fairfield that, even though so many of the pieces of housing in District 5 would not be labeled as affordable housing, if one were to come there to purchase a home, there are many homes that are in the $200,000 to $300,000 bracket, which is really a very affordable home in Fairfield. In addition, there are many multifamily homes there. They don't appear as affordable housing in Fairfield, but that's because the state legislation was written in a particular way, and it did not allow us to put them into the inventory. I really believe that this is not an appropriate project for Fairfield. It's not really and truly affordable housing. It is a windfall for the developer.
Thank you.
Good evening, Catherine Braun. I'm an attorney in town. I'm also an RTM representative in District 8, and I happen to represent the intervening parties on the wetlands application associated with this project. So I want to clear up one misconception. We filed an intervention primarily because at the time the wetlands application was filed, there was no Phase 1 or Phase 2 study of the soils on the site, and there were many, many influences that the town staff, conservation staff, felt could have caused contamination of the site. During the course of the hearing...
Could I just ask a quick procedural question?
Yes.
So, Ms. Braun, are you here then on behalf of
No.
clients?
No.
You're here in your capacity as an RTM?
I'm here to raise issues of environmental concern and relating to health and safety.
Terrific.
So, and I'm imparting to some of the knowledge I acquired during the wetlands hearing, which took place a few months ago.
Thank you.
So during the course of the hearing, the Phase 1 and Phase 2 that had been done in May of 2013 was finally submitted. However, the intervening parties had retained a licensed environmental professional who found that it was flawed. It was inadequate, didn't test for metals in the right places, didn't test for anything in the tributary to Mill River, which runs along the north boundary of the property near I-95. So this all went into the record, and I'm going to put some of those items in here before you, because even though the Wetlands Agency issued a permit and denied the intervention, Those same issues still exist. There's still a lack of testing that was done, and that should have been done. And without having that information, I don't think this commission can be fully informed in rendering a decision on this project, where you might have 100 or 200 people living here, not knowing what exactly is in the soils on this site. Now, there was a phase 2 done, but it was not tested in all the places that the conservation staff recommended, or that the licensed environmental professional that the interveners retained recommended. So I'm going to hand out a few items now. You'll have to excuse me. This is one full set for the official record. Oh, thanks, yeah. And I just want to point out these 3 little maps. The one I pulled, I'm sorry, did something drop?
No.
Oh, the one I pulled down off the DEP website I was also involved in the Exide remediation along with Attorney Fallon. I represented the intervening parties there also. And half the town intervened because the Shellfish Commission, the Conservation Commission, and the Harbor Management Commission all intervened into that DEP hearing to make sure we got a good cleanup of Mill River. And this Area 1 that Mr. Shine mentioned is one of the most contaminated areas, and that is directly along the shoreline of this property. So the aerial I pulled down is not adequate, so I cannibalized from what he submitted so I could show you where the chromium is and where the lead is. So if you look at what I've labeled number 3.
Do we have that now?
I don't know if you have this. This is what I pulled down. Unfortunately, it's not, at the very bottom, it shows where this property is.
Before you go forward.
Yes.
Do you have copies of that?
That's the only copy I have. Oh, no, I have copies of that, but that unfortunately does not show the whole site that I wanted to show.
It's in this detail.
Yeah, well, I'm going to show them this also. So to further explain that,
You need this. This is the only original?
yes, of that. So I'm calling that K Braun number 3.
Okay, we're on number 3. Mr.
And
Fallon, did you...
I don't have an extra copy.
I need to just work through this
Okay,
for a
sure.
second, because I want to have what you are referring to.
Yes.
So that we can read and look at this.
Okay.
While you're doing it. It will be more meaningful that
Okay.
way. I also want to make sure that the applicant and Mr. Green and Attorney Green have copies of...
What I'm going to do with that, the one I just handed out, I have copies of
Unless
that.
you don't want it.
No, what I would suggest that we keep it moving is if Catherine doesn't have copies
Here,
of what...
there's one, I have a copy of this one.
That's fine, but anything she doesn't have a copy of, I'm sure Mr. Wendt and Mr. Ivanchek and Mr. Decker can supply to Mr. Green and I assume we're not going to finish tonight.
That's a lofty assumption.
Well, not to be pessimistic, but, as long as I ultimately get some time.
Yeah, Mike, give him the one. Yeah, just...
My point is...
You're fine. That's your point.
Okay, so this, and again, this one that I've labeled Braun number 3, I'm handing it out. I'm handing out 10 copies for just commissioners to look at.
Thank you.
And I apologize, it didn't pull down adequately, but if you see at the very bottom, that's Area 1. It shows the beginning of the tributary that goes into this property, or flows out of this property. It shows exceedances of chromium, and if you look at the ones that Mr. Shine handed out, those show actually much better the chromium, but it's a smaller picture. So those show, I'm going to hand out now something that was in Mr. Shine's package, but I'm calling it K Braun number 2. This shows between I-95 and Metro North, Area 1, on the west side of Mill River, the tributary and significant amounts of chromium exceedances all along the shoreline of this property. So I'm handing that out as an exhibit, even though it's already in the record.
That's the original. We got copies of that.
Yeah, you have copies. I just thought I'd put that in to support what I'm saying.
Okay.
And then I'm just showing the Mill River study area so that you can see that the whole length of the area that's being remediated. Number 5 is at the top, above I-95. Number 1 comes next downstream. That's this area 1 between I-95 and Metro North. Area 2 is between Metro North Railroad and the Post Road, and number 3 is between the Post Road and Dr. Scolin's property. And number 4 is the Southport Harbor area. So I'm just going to hand this out so you can position the cleanup. And you may or may not be aware, but the Mill River cleanup is due to start imminently. I'm not sure exactly what date, but it's supposed to start this summer, maybe even this month. Attorney Fallon might know more about that. Now, that's the lead that came from Exide, which is a little bit downstream and across the river. There's also a chromium problem, which comes from Superior Plating, which is just south of this parcel across the Metro North Railroad tracks. Even though that's under a judgment to clean up the sediments of chromium in the river, there does not appear to be any current plan to do so. So I'm aware of no action being taken to clear up the chromium. By happenstance, the chromium that happens to be within the lead cleanup areas will probably be cleaned up because it's there and they're dredging. However, other chromium areas will not be cleaned up if they're not where the lead is located, where the lead dredging will be taking place. So there could actually be another cleanup down the line of the chromium. That's just sort of the backstory. These are 2 heavy waste-producing industrial sites. A huge amount of lead was generated by Exide over a 30-year period. Then the last 30 years were spent negotiating and trying to get it cleaned up. One cleanup was attempted a few years ago. It resulted in recontamination of the river, and it's a long, difficult process. It's supposed to take about 2 years. Who knows, maybe it'll take longer. But it's going to take place all up and down this stretch of river. Okay, I'm not going to read my letter. I will hand it out when I'm finished speaking from it. There are many sources of contamination, which you've heard from other people. You have I-95 that was constructed in 1955 on the north border, which is where this tributary is, and the wetlands surrounding it. You have Metro North, which has had significant maintenance repairs. It was elevated at one time. At the wetlands hearing, one of the neighbors indicated that they've seen debris and railroad ties and things from the railroad tracks on abutting properties in this area, and those can contain toxins such as creosote. You have the historical use as a farm, orchard, and there's also at the wetlands hearing, a letter was submitted, which I know Attorney Fallon has. I don't have enough copies of this, but I think that's in my package. Actually I do have 2 extras, so I'll give one to Attorney Green. And this letter was written by a woman whose grandparents had bought this land in the early 20s, had farmed it. Yes?
Before you get started into the letter, you had said something when you first started about phase 2?
There was a phase 1 and a phase 2 done in May of 2013. It was not submitted, so nobody knew it existed until during the wetlands hearing, which is one reason some of the people intervened, because we wanted to make sure testing was done. It was submitted, but both conservation staff and the licensed environmental professional that the interveners hired both concluded that it was inadequate and flawed. And I have some details in my letter, and also I'm going to...
I understood that at some point the commission asked for more information and asked the applicant for an extension, and they refused to agree to an extension. Was that this?
There was a whole long story behind who was submitting what when, but it was submitted, and then there was some supplemental testing done in February. I'm not aware of any testing done after that. And so the last thing I have is something from conservation staff after that supplemental testing was done in February, and it reiterates what our own licensed environmental professional of the interveners said, which is the testing that has been done did not test enough for metals and did not test in certain areas that should have been tested in, such as the footings of some of these farm buildings in the wetland and watercourse area, which could be the types of soils that could retain toxins more than the sandy soils that were on the other areas of the property. This was mentioned by Ms. Jacobson.
How do we deal with your comments in light of the fact that conservation has granted an approval?
Well, I'll explain that. The Wetlands Agency has a very limited jurisdiction. It can only discuss, evaluate, and issue a permit based on whether there are impacts or not to an adjacent or nearby wetlands or watercourse. Within 144 feet, that's the buffer area in Mill River watershed. So that's all it can do. On top of that, this tributary, about half of it, the agency determined it had no jurisdiction over because that's in the DEP area where it's tidally, that's Tidally, influenced, and as well as the shoreline of Mill River. So the commission decided not to consider the impact on Mill River of potential contamination that would be in this tributary or the wetlands, you know, in the soils around the tributary, which runs along the side. And this happens to also be the area where there's a barn or some kind of an outbuilding overhanging that little creek, and also where all the dumping was done. And this is in some of these reports. Historically, that family that lived there dumped lots of stuff there, including chlordane, pesticides. Chlordane is a bad pesticide that was used, and it was probably improperly disposed of. That's in the letter written by the granddaughter of the people who used to live there. So all these factors, as well as there's some questionable status of the groundwater that was raised at the hearing. It's classified as GA impaired. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it means it could have some kind of impairment, which is unknown. So, and all these factors led the conservation staff, including Director Stanky and Annette Jacobson, as well as the licensed environmental professional that the interveners retained, to suggest that not only did the phase one need to be done, and it was done, but it should have been done better. There should have been testing in more places. There should have been more testing for metals, and there certainly should have been testing in areas where the farm and barn buildings were and where the dumping area was in that tributary. However, the commission, only being allowed to determine if there was an impact on a wetland or a watercourse, they just determined they didn't have enough jurisdiction and they approved the permit. They do not make decisions on the health, welfare, and safety of the entire community. That's what this commission does. So I'm not here to say they shouldn't have issued a wetlands permit. I'm here to say this has not been adequately tested. There's enough evidence and information from experts that I'm giving you now the reports of, where this commission can request additional information. And it should be provided, because this commission should not approve a residential development for perhaps 200 people at a dead-end road sticking out in the middle of Mill River that's completely inundated with heavy industrial use for decades without getting complete information so this commission can be fully informed. And that's really why I'm here. So I'm just not going to, again, I'm not going to read my whole letter, but I have found a case which has somewhat similar facts where it's called Epileti, and I give the site in my letter. I'll just read the quote from the...
So the reports that you just mentioned are to be submitted. You have not submitted. I haven't seen
maybe I haven't submitted them. I've been talking too much. Let me submit the report from our LEP. I submitted the report from the conservation staff. That's in the record.
Yep.
I didn't have enough to hand out.
I've seen, and that's
Okay.
why I asked about
Okay.
I knew about the intervention. That's in the record. Knew about the approval, understand the reasons for approval, etc. You raised some arguments that merit due consideration. And I want to make sure that if you have reports that you're referencing, that we know we have them, because I have not seen that.
Okay, let me identify the reports. Okay, one report is the January 31st, 2014 report of conservation staff.
You're going to be submitting them for the record?
That was put in the record, but not enough copies for anybody else. So one original was in, I think one extra is floating around.
January 2014.
I'm sorry, January 31st, 2014, conservation staff recommendation to the agency, basically saying we need a lot more data. At the time they wrote that report, they didn't know the phase one had been done because it had not been submitted yet. It was not submitted until the first night of public hearing. So, but it gives a lot of history of the site, a lot of reasons why we would think there could be contamination in the site. So it should be read to see the influences of the heavy industrial area, the farm use, and things like that. And that's background for why completely rigorous and comprehensive testing should have been done. The next item is the conservation Annette Jacobson wrote an updated report during the course of the wetlands hearing dated March 6th, which was presented on the last night of the public hearing, 2014. And she, in that report, is summarizing things that went before, including the most recent updated testing, the phase 1, what the interveners LEP had said, and she recites a whole litany of deficiencies in the testing that had finally been disclosed to have been done and had been supplemented. And I'll summarize those in a moment. But so that's the next item that's in the record. There's one extra one. There's also the letter from Susan Dudko Deacon, the granddaughter of the people who bought this property in the 1920s, and that's dated 2/9/14.
Who's the author of that?
Her name is Susan Dudko Deacon, D-E-A-K-E-N. That's in the record as an original. I think there might be an extra copy. And she put in her letter that, they dumped along the tributary there, they threw empty chlordane bags in the area, and that it was used for farming. So, and these same issues were commented on by staff. And that's one reason the wetlands permit requires that the dump be cleared up, which itself could, and that the outbuilding that's overhanging the creek is going to be demolished. But those two issues could actually be problematic if you don't do testing, because I don't know what's there, and I don't know what could be leaching out there once they start doing that demo work and the cleanup work. Then there's a report dated February 27th, 2014 by the licensed environmental professional, and these are experts which are licensed by the state to do evaluations of contamination and do site monitor work for remediation activities. So this is an LEP that was retained by the interveners, and in his report dated February 27th, he's pointing out what he believes are deficiencies in the process and in the testing itself. He's basically saying they did...
Go into it real quick.
Yes?
Can you just go into it real quick?
Sure, I'll go through it. He said available historic records such as the Sanborn insurance maps and city directories were not included in the phase 1. These resources are commonly used to fully develop the site history and to sufficiently develop areas of concern. Those are abbreviated as AOCs. Areas of concern are when you do the initial look through, you figure out what is of concern to do a whole lot more looking. There was limited discussion of potential environmental impacts from superior plating or exide to the site. And one thing Mr. Stanky said, I honestly don't know if this ever made it into the record. He told me he's concerned not just with the chromium that's in the water that could come up through flooding events, but he believes there could be airborne chromium that could be floating around and landing, in different places. But none of this soil anywhere has ever been tested. There's nothing that triggers testing. This was tested because it was prudent to do so, but there's nothing that really triggers residential sales. The Transfer Act is not triggered when one resident sells to another resident. It's not a gas station or a dry cleaner or something like that. So, and this came up actually at the Exide long-winded work study sessions we did, where Mr. Stanky felt they should do testing on the adjacent railroad drain, and that was never requested. But, that could be contaminated too. That has nothing to do with this. That's across the river. But, so most of this area has not been tested, and nothing triggers it. What we're saying is, experts have said it should have been tested better, and we're asking you to order that it be tested better so you can be fully informed. He's also Is it too close to me?
Oh, Jerry's is.
I probably don't even need the mic. He also said there were no areas sampled within the watercourse or within the immediate zone of the watercourse's influence, and that's, of course, what drains into Mill River. And the areas where the town and previous owners have referenced dumping and pesticide application were either not thoroughly sampled or not indicated for sampling. It appears that soil samples B1, 4, and 5 were not tested for metals, PCBs, or PAHs, despite their locations adjacent to the watercourse. And by watercourse, he means that tributary, not Mill River. And within proximity to a reported dump area on the site. It appears that soil samples B7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 were not tested for metals despite the recommendations of experts and town staff during the public hearing. And I just want to point out, I don't have a transcript, but I was there when the commission had the executive session when they voted. And the Chairman Gumper and other members were troubled that staff requested that they test in the area of the wetland and the watercourse, and they were troubled that it wasn't done. It appears that soil samples B1 through B6 were not tested for pesticides. Also, according to DEP guidelines, soil samples should be collected at depths of 0 to 3 inches where pesticides are applied, stored, and handled. And it is strongly recommended that a more thorough sampling scheme be implemented in the area believed by GeoQuest to be the location of the former farming area. And they also point out this thing about the groundwater being classified as GA impaired, which indicates that groundwater in this area is designated as GA and that there may be a known or potential impaired source. That's all the information I have on that. I can't even tell you what it means, but that's, to me, tells me that there could be impairment, and it would be prudent to do more testing if you're going to put 100 or 200 people on this site. So I have extra copies of this report, which I'll hand out. I submitted one package of everything for the record. These are extras if they want to look at them. Pardon me? Oh, let me find that.
I have 4 reports that you referenced.
I think that's.
I don't have them physically. I mean, I understood you to be referencing 4 reports. Is that accurate?
Correct. That is
Okay.
correct. There's 2 by the department staff,
Yep.
1 by the LEP expert, and 1 by the woman who's the granddaughter of the people who did the farming there. And that's in the record. I'll give you my copy of that letter, just so you have an extra. I apologize. I drove in from Rhode Island about an hour ago. I'm not as organized as I should be. And actually, here's an extra set of the 2 staff reports for... Pardon me? Okay, and conservation staff pointed out that the facts of historic farm use were, from the prior owner dating back to the 20s. Aerial photos from 1931 showing orchards. This warranted testing around all barn structures and other areas. Our LEP said that wasn't done. Maybe in some places, but not all the places it should have been done. The conservation staff, I believe this was in Mr. Stanky's January 31st report, indicated that common use of farm chemical pesticides began in the 1800s and increased after World War II, and all these facts combined are considered more than adequate reason to have the soils on site tested for pesticides and RCRA metals, just as the town does when it buys properties or when it acquires land. According to the staff recommendation, it is a reasonable request to know about the soil conditions prior to loading such soils with the site runoff and potentially leaching out such contaminants. That's in the January 31st report. There is factual evidence based on the Susan Dudko letter as well as the staff observations that this was used for farming, that pesticides were very commonly used, and in fact were used on this site, including chlordane, and that it was stored and probably improperly disposed of. We don't know how much. It came up at the wetlands hearing. This is not a commercial farm, but there's no indication how much was used. Certainly decades of it was used, and it has not been adequately tested for. So if we don't know, we really can't say. I don't think we should just conclude that there's nothing there. Where they did do testing, they did not find exceedances. It was mostly at the background level. So where the testing was done, they did not find problems. But the LEP and the conservation staff both believe they should have tested in other areas where they didn't test. Especially this tributary which drains into Mill River. And then the other sources, as we've mentioned, the heavy industrial use, Area 1 of Mill River, just across the train tracks, Superior Plating. This part of Mill River is not People are precluded from wading, swimming, crabbing, any kind of shellfish work, or contact with the contaminated sediments. I went through the remediation activities that are proposed that are going to take place, but nothing is going to take place for the chromium, as far as we know. Conservation staff recommended additional soil samples and testing for pesticides and metals in the previously farmed areas, for volatile organic compounds known as VOCs, as well as SVOCs, metals in the dumping areas on the steep banks along the tributary, within the tributary, because contamination could be transported to the residential site from storm events from the Mill River, around and under the barn for pesticide storage and spillage.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Could you just repeat again what
LEP? I'm sorry. LEP, I'm sorry. It's a licensed environmental professional. There's specific experts that can deal with remediation issues. They're licensed by the state. And I'll just recite the case that I mentioned. I have a citation, I don't have a copy, but it's called Epileti Realty versus Ridgefield TPZ. It's a Superior Court case. The decision is dated 11/14/2013. In this case, they imposed a condition of approval that was not found acceptable by the applicant. The court found that collecting groundwater analysis was, quote, necessary to protect the and this was an 8-30G case also, was, quote, necessary to protect the substantial public interest in health and safety, is appropriate, and was based on more than mere possibilities. It went on to quote from another Supreme Court case called Christian Activities Council Congregation versus Town Council at 249 Con 585. And this quote says, the zoning commission need not establish that the effects it sought to avoid by denying the application are definite or more likely than not to occur, but that such evidence must establish more than a mere possibility of such occurrence. My reading of this, as well as other cases, is reasonable likelihood. That's a term of art that I believe if this commission feels it's reasonably likely there could be contamination and it wasn't tested, then this commission has a right to deny this based on inadequate information.
What's the case name and citation?
Okay, the Epileti case is a Superior Court case.
What's the name?
EPPOLITI.
EPPOLITI.
Yeah, P as in Peter. Yep. EPPOLITI Realty versus Planning and Zoning of Ridgefield. CV 12 dash.
Hold on.
Okay.
I presume you don't have copies of that.
I left
V Ridgefield. What's the site?
It's a docket number, CV 12 603 8941S. Date of the decision is 11/14/13. I'm not aware, I did a site check, I'm not aware of anything after that, but that's fairly recent, so.
Is that a reported decision?
It says unreported.
Well, it says unreported, but does it have a Westlaw or Lexus site?
I use Lois Law, so I don't know.
Lois Law doesn't have a citation system.
Yeah.
No, okay.
So I can
What's
put it
the
into
court?
the
Is it Superior Court?
Superior Court. I'm assuming Danbury, but who knows? You know, I can email it to.
Please do.
Yeah, I'll email it.
That would be helpful.
And the site, there's cases cited within that case, which I won't bother mentioning. You can read the case and see those sites. Okay. And then I just want to conclude by saying the applicant should provide this commission with enough information, whether requested or whether just simply applicable based on the unique circumstances that this piece of land presents. They've been, working with this for a long time. This commission, it's all new. So these issues of potential contamination from multiple sources, from heavy industrial use, from farm use, from potential flooding events. Actually, one of the neighbors mentioned there were flooding events, so Mill River could have flooded up at various times historically and deposited toxins from the river onto the site. We don't know because it wasn't tested. So there's enough evidence here, I believe, for this commission to certainly request that the testing that the conservation staff recommended be done, because this has to do with the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The Wetlands Agency was only allowed to look at an impact on an inland wetland and a watercourse, not even the coastal area. And I also believe that under your CAM review, your coastal site review, and I personally have not seen it, there may be, that gives you also the authority to determine if there will be a negative impact potentially on the coastal waters, which is this whole tidal area. This is tidally influenced. That's why DEP was involved. Aside from the fact that it was a remediation activity, the town wetlands agency did not get involved in the Exide discussion of the lead because they felt this was tidally influenced. Therefore, it's purely state jurisdiction, not town, in terms of wetlands permitting activity. And I know Attorney Fallon will agree with me on that. I don't agree. I believe there's dual jurisdiction, but that's not for this hearing. So the agency had no jurisdiction over impacts on Mill River or impacts on tidally influenced water that the DEP is responsible for, that the state is responsible for. So that's really two areas of restrictions. It has to be an inland wetland, not other general environmental concerns, and there's case law that points out the wetlands agency is not a mini EPA or DEP, it's only wetlands and water courses.
Right. Question for
Okay.
you. So yesterday we had some dialogue about the orders requiring remediation as against the Exide factory and the chromium that you mentioned before, but that this plot of land was not, the owners of this plot of land were not under any orders for remediation.
That is correct.
That is correct?
Yes.
Okay. So presently, there is no government agency, federal, state, local, that has determined that there is contamination and that this site must be remediated.
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So one last quote from the Eppoliti case. And in this case, that zoning board wanted groundwater testing done. I'm considering that analogous to this, if this commission should request it. Certainly the conservation staff requested it. And they didn't do it. And then they appealed because they didn't feel, they felt that the commission should have to, there was no reason to do the testing, but the commission felt there was reason to require the testing. So the Eppoliti court said that an applicant should not be permitted to refuse to submit requested information and then file an appeal in an attempt to force the town to prove that the information was necessary under the burden switching mechanism of 8-30G. It would be one thing to submit a complete application with all the required analysis and have it indicate that there is no threat to public health or safety, and then challenge the commission's denial based on a lack of sufficient evidence. But it is another thing to refuse to supply the information when requested. So my reading of that is, if this commission feels, as the conservation staff felt, that we need additional testing before we start approving 200 people or 100 to 200 people living here, then they should do the testing. And it shouldn't be on this commission to go and prove any more than's already been established by the expert reports you have, that there is a need to do the testing in the places and of the materials that were recommended.
Are you aware of the letter that we received dated July 9, which is today, from the Connecticut DEP? It's just clarifies.
Does it have to do with water-dependent uses?
Yeah, it clarifies the orders for cleanup and that the Mill River is not a part of the subject property, et cetera. It talks about the jurisdiction of DEP over the subject property. I just didn't know if you had seen
I have not seen that letter.
Okay.
I assume the DEP is not claiming it has jurisdiction over the soils on this property at this point.
That's right.
However,
That's what I wanted to
Yeah.
get. So however what? Talk to me.
if this commission feels in its role as protector of the health and safety and welfare of our community, in light of expert opinions that I've provided you, that additional testing should be done in the places where those experts said it should be done, then I think this commission certainly has the authority to request that information. Just like you want a traffic study and other types of safety studies, you don't have to wait for an accident to say we need to have traffic information.
Because in your opinion, the reports that you've provided, which I haven't read yet, provide us a reasonable basis upon which to conclude that the soil is indeed contaminated?
To conclude that it would be imprudent to approve this without getting sufficient information to be fully informed. And there's plenty of case law. I raised this in the wetlands hearing. I think the case, I can't remember the name of the case, but there's certainly case law that this commission can deny an application based on lack of information. And you determine what information you need. So long as you have a reasonable basis to require enough information, this commission has a serious responsibility. It would be awful if this was constructed and then we found there was contamination there. And all kinds of problems happen with flooding and things like this. So my argument is there's enough information that I've provided you and the known issues of all the things I've mentioned, that this commission can and should request the testing that has been recommended by other experts. And if the applicant fails to provide it, then it should be denied for lack of information. And it has nothing to do with what the Wetlands Agency did. That was a very restricted area of authority. They did not have anything to do with tidal water bodies, which is about half of this tributary, and they didn't have anything to do with anything that wasn't a wetland or a water course. So this commission has much broader authority. This is, in fact, the commission that helps protect our environment, as well as the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And as a side issue, it would be really awful if anything coming off this site helped to recontaminate the river, which is about to embark on a multi-year cleanup that's been waiting for 30 years to be done.
Did you see the Phase 2 report for this application or no?
I saw it, but I'm not an expert. I had a wetlands consultant also that reviewed that, as well as the LEP. And they reviewed it and they reported on it in this report, as did the second conservation staff. The first one was submitted without knowing there was a Phase 1. The second one was done by Ms. Jacobson, and she had seen the Phase 1 as well as, I think, the extra testing that was done after that. And both conservation staff as well as our LEP both felt the testing was not done on enough metals in enough places, or in the tributary, or near some of the buildings or the dumping area. And those are areas and certainly those are areas that are prone to be influenced by floodwaters, and if there is something bad, it's going to get around more than if it's up on a high and dry area. That's just logic. I don't think you need to be an expert to say that. So if the hearing remains open, I can email you the case and anything else. I can get...
Well, you can email us the case.
I can email all these documents, actually.
Frankly, now, at this point, I would tend to agree with Mr. Fallon. I don't think we're going to finish tonight, because I know that Attorney Green has an hour and a half worth of, and we need to take a short break. It's been a long day for everybody. But notwithstanding that, you can still submit the referenced materials that you have, that you've cited, and I want you to do that.
I will do that.
And then I would ask you guys to send them to the relevant people.
Thank you. That's all I have.
That's
Thanks.
all you have.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Can I have a very short? Yes, go ahead.
I'm Joy Shaw. I live at... Let me help you with that, ma'am. Okay, just sit. Thank you. Speak right at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Joy Shaw. I live at 476 Gold Mill Road. Chairman Wagner and Commission members, I reside on the Mill River upstream of the proposed development, and have spent over 40 years observing and studying the river in conjunction with writing and illustrating the River Lab program for the Fairfield Public Schools, which, by the way, involves about 3,000 to 4,000 children a year. I have introduced many persons to the charms of this local main stream. My concerns about the above-noted proposal are as follows. To reiterate what has been being said in great detail, we do not know the extent of contamination that may exist in the soil on this property, which contaminants may be brought to the surface with excavation for development. Further testing is needed to assure that the river, about to be cleaned of lead by Exide Inco, would not be recontaminated by such chemicals as chlordane or others, a substance routinely used for farming purposes at the time when farming was conducted on this land. The possibility of other contamination from neighboring industry also exists. As proposed for condominium development, including affordable housing, this building would house families with children. Raising children on the edge of a river requires constant vigilance, an impossible commitment for most families today. I know I did it. If that river is subject to toxic contamination from property runoff, the dangers are compounded. Disaster and lawsuits could result. From the greater community perspective, I hope that this Commission's commitment to respect the character of neighborhoods will resonate strongly in their consideration of this proposal. This Bronson Road area is one of small 1 to 2 story homes. Nowhere upstream is there a 4-story structure. This 4-story development would be a disturbing departure from the present character of this section of the river and upstream. Mill River has been violated in many ways, but it continues to offer scenic repose for boating residents. A trip downstream refreshes those making it with stretch after stretch, where vegetation shields the voyager from any sense of being in a developed community. And visible residences are for the most part modestly sized, partially screened, and set back from the river's edge. The proposed development would have none of these attributes. It would have a jarring effect on the viewer and stand as an insensitive depreciation of one of the town's greatest assets. Please deny this application as proposed and ask the developer to conduct tests for soil contamination and to return with a proposal more fitting in all ways for this property. Respectfully submitted, Jocelyn T. Shaw.
You could give us this stuff. Thank you for your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, I do plan to take a short break. Just a few minutes. Are there any other members of the public that wish to be heard before we call Joel Green on behalf of the association? Just a show of hands, if I may. Yeah, so we do have a few more. I've been sitting for a long time today, as most of you have. We'll take a short recess, I promise, only 3 or 4 minutes. During the break, I did have occasion to talk to someone about rejiggering who's going to speak next, and I think Attorney Green is up next.
I almost forgot what I was going to say, but doubt it. Once again, good evening, Mr. Chairman.
It's always good to lead with a joke.
Trying. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, zoning staff, members of the public. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross, and it's my pleasure to appear before you this evening on behalf of the Lower Bronson Neighborhood Alliance. Recent high school graduates, recent college graduates, current students, graduate students, hourly wage workers, public safety personnel, police, fire, emergency responders, the elderly, the young, small business entrepreneurs, and the list goes on. If any of these categories describe you, describe someone who touches your life, describe someone near and dear to you, then you recognize the need for affordable housing in Fairfield and indeed in all communities. But at the end of the day, this application is not a referendum on affordable housing. That's not really why we're here in terms of the need. We are moving forward as a town. The dialogue is front and center, and we've been active in Fairfield and we are approaching and dealing with this problem. I recently had an opportunity in my capacity as a former member of the Board of Operation Hope to meet with one of the consultants involved with the study being conducted by the Affordable Housing Task Force. And he was impressed with the many people he had interviewed, with the effort, interest, creativity, thought, and the expression of need and seriousness with which we are taking this as a town. And I want to emphasize that, and I don't want this applicant to minimize the efforts in this town and the thought that is going into this problem in this town, both in terms of the citizenry, our elected officials, and the like, in addressing, creating a wider array of housing that is affordable in Fairfield. And it's going on everywhere. But once again, it's not about affordable housing, and I don't hear anyone suggesting that it's the affordable issue. Rather, what has brought people out and what has captured the interest, and frankly, I think what is stunning to this community is the use of 8-30 in this instance. The zoning regulations of our town are an expression, and it's a changing body, our regulations, as you know. It's an expression of what is just, fair, and reasonable in terms of the organization, the development, and the use of our town. It is an expression of what is just, fair, and reasonable. And in this instance, this applicant is using 8-30G, that statute, to create a development that is too large. It's too close to the property lines. It's too tall. It has too many units. It covers too much of the site. It has too few parking spaces. The driveways are too narrow. It generates excessive traffic. It does not have adequate landscaping. And it fails 6 other categories in our zoning regulations, which once again describe what is just, fair, and reasonable. And so this has caused concern in this town. And this is not, and you hear the acronym NIMBY, which is not in my backyard, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is when you try to use 8-30 to create a development that is so unjust, unfair, and unreasonable, then what this town has said from Grassmere to Greenfield Hill and from Southport to Stratfield is NIMBY. Now I must become involved with an I. That's what's going on in this town. And this development is not safe, and it does not comply with the law. And for that reason, we will be asking this commission to deny this application. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce a member of the board of the Lower Bronson Neighborhood Alliance who will tell you a little bit about the organization, Patty Sullivan.
Wow, NIMBY. Now I am involved. Wow, this is kind of like the coming out. I can't believe tonight is really here. You know, just to lay a little bit of groundwork, and I'll be really brief, there are obviously so many issues. The myriad of issues surrounding this are huge. I liken it to, you know, Pigpen on Charlie Brown. I liken it to that big dust cloud, or I call it a hairball. There was so much talk last night and tonight about the very, very serious safety concerns over the road issues, and it's the road issue that actually galvanized the neighborhood. In late September 2013, the Kovacs, who live at the yellow duplex on the corner, whose property is significantly impacted by this, received a letter from Garden Home announcing their plans and stating that the Kovacs, the area of lawn that they are proposing to remove to widen the road. This is how we heard about this development. Very, very, well, you'll have the letter, it's in public record now. And this letter motivated Krista, who just handed that out to you, Krista Grant Kovacs, whose family has lived on this property for 100+ years, to jump in and form the Lower Bronson Neighborhood Alliance. I'm co-leading the organization along with Krista, and we are joined tonight by concerned friends, neighbors. You've heard from a lot of them who have helped in our effort, who have, you know, with time, with donations, And of course, Joel Green is here to represent all of our collective concerns, the concerns of LBNA, the concerns of Sasquanag, Southport Conservancy, the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association. All of these groups have galvanized and have been here, and you've seen various members of them speak tonight and sit in the audience. So I'm going to be brief. I wanted to just lay the groundwork for you of the Lower Bronson Neighborhood Alliance. I live on Bronson Road. And last night, I wasn't going to get into issues because so many other people have said so many eloquent things, and there's so much more to come, of course, with Joel. But I was so struck by the dichotomy of the issues. I was so struck by, for example, I think this is the largest rental complex in town with 95, 94 units. I think. I'm not an expert at that. Juxtaposed on a narrow, dead-end access road that the town doesn't even plow, by the way, and Joel may touch on that. The Kovacs family has been plowing that road. I'm struck by, the potential for housing, yes, young professionals and the elderly. Obviously, as we've talked about, there isn't enough parking. What about the people who need to come in and service the elderly? What about the family who are going to visit the elderly? What about the nannies for the professionals who are going to live there, who are going to have one child, two child? Where are those people going to go? We've got housing with traffic that feeds on. We've talked about Bronson Road. I am your expert on Bronson Road. We don't need a traffic expert. I live on the road. I fear backing my car out on Bronson Road. We don't need to talk about the number of whatever the terminology is for the number of cars that come and go and when they come and go. What about the speed at which people travel on this road? Let's do a speed analysis. I fear walking to my neighbors. We have no sidewalks. We have cars coming from North Fairfield. I don't need to belabor the point, but cars fly down there. They fly onto the ramp. They fly off the ramp. And I believe one of the accidents mentioned last night was when someone came off that ramp and went right into the house in front of it over the holidays, crashed into the house. That may have been that one-car accident that was reported. We have no crosswalks. We have no sidewalks. We've talked about that. Waterfront serenity. The river is, and we talked last night about the waterfront property. Yes, the juxtaposition of I-95 and the railroad, which some say, oh, ooh, about this property. This is recreational waterfront property. I use it every day when I go out and kayak. This weekend there were paddleboards, there were canoes, there were kayakers. We are not just weekend conservationists, which was a term used during the conservation hearings. Kids swim in this river, believe it or not. There is open land across from where I live. I see them jump in the water. I think they may be nuts. Perhaps they are nuts because they've been in the water. But nonetheless, the community feeds the ducks down there. And the conjecture last night about this property, about the river not being used for commercial uses, Krista is going to hand out, in Westport, there's a company called Down Under. Once this river is cleaned up, this river should be used for people to come to kayak and canoe. It's our only tidal tributary in town. I mean, this is a gem, as Jan spoke to as well. And this Down Under, who knows? Maybe that could happen. Maybe that could happen. I hope it happens. Stephen spoke to, the bicycle, and we've got stencils now. We're a bike neighborhood. Other juxtaposition, and I know this is part of the law, but we as homeowners must abide by P&Z laws that you have very carefully laid out. Developers, my husband, a builder, we all must, and sometimes we grouse about it, we all must comply. But I'm sorry, legal rule breaking is an oxymoron. It just isn't right. It isn't just. So just like the pigpen dust cloud, the list goes on. So there's so much for you to weed through. There's so much for you to consider. You've got volumes and volumes and volumes of paper. The neighborhood, the town, we appreciate what you do. We don't envy what you do. You have a really huge challenge ahead. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel again. Thank you. Joel will organize that pigpen cloud.
Thank you. All right, so just sort of a housekeeping item. I noted that in reviewing the application. I'm really uncertain about the nature of this application, and I've spent a fair amount of time looking at it. I suppose that it falls under somewhat of a mix. I've seen it referred to as a certificate of zoning compliance, but it's obviously not that in any direct way, and it appears to be some sort of a site plan review, but it doesn't fit neatly into any of our categories in our regulations, certainly. So some of the comments I make will address that as we go forward. I do note, however, that 8-30G in paragraph B1 refers to the requirements that any person filing an affordable housing application with a commission shall submit as part of the application an affordability plan, which shall include at least the following. And among those requirements is subparagraph E, which speaks in terms of draft zoning regulations, conditions of approvals, deeds, restrictive covenants, or lease provisions that will govern the affordable dwelling units. And I just want to state for the record that I've reviewed the file, I've reviewed the document submitted by the applicant, and to my understanding, there are not any draft zoning regulations proposed by the applicant with respect to this application. I tend to believe that the applicant understands that they did not do that, but I am raising that as an issue in this proceeding.
Right, so in their packet at page 6 is their affordability plan.
Yes.
And under 830G, their position is that due to that plan and the deed restriction on the property or the units, that under 830G, they no longer have to comply with zoning regulations. And our task is to determine whether the property is, safe, public health, safety, and welfare.
Understood. But,
and as such, they've not applied for any modification to our zoning regulations.
Well, I am just going to submit, I understand the affordability plan referenced in 8-30GB1, and certainly there are certain aspects of subparagraphs A, B, C, and D that have been complied with, but it is the position of my client that draft zoning regulations are required to be included. I understand that the applicant has elected not to do that. I think we probably have a legal dispute on the requirement of doing that, and I'm just raising that as an issue for the commission, and just so that it's part of the record.
Happy to have it raised. What would those zoning regulations say?
They would propose, presumably, they would be draft zoning regulations that are applicable to the site upon which this set-aside development would be located. They would set forth standards for adoption by the commission that would govern this particular site. I believe that's what was contemplated by the legislature. I understand that this is an area of legal dispute in Connecticut. I would submit that it is.
Yes, and that was my next question, is what is the nature of the legal authority on the issue? I mean, do you have any cases that stand for the proposition that zoning regulation amendments are required in an 830G application or not?
There is case law that suggests that it's not, and I would suggest that that is an issue that has not been ruled upon by the Supreme Court of the state of Connecticut.
Got it.
And so I am formally raising it in this application.
Understood. Are there Superior Court cases that go both ways or only one way?
There's an appellate court case that suggests that the issue did not, that the zoning regulations did not have to be submitted, and that upheld the granting of an affordable plan under 8-30G without draft zoning regulations.
Okay. And are you aware of any cases which hold otherwise?
I'm not aware of anything that rises to an appellate court decision at this time.
What about Superior Court?
I don't have that for the commission. I can look into that.
Okay. Well, we would certainly be happy to receive any authority that would stand for that proposition.
All right. So I raised the issue just for the record, and
thank you.
We'll proceed from there. So as I listened to the presentation last evening, I was struck that the engineer for the applicant referred to the access from Bronson Road as, quote, a driveway, repeatedly referred to it as a driveway. I submit that this is a town road. It is a right-of-way. And there are documents in the record that support that. I will tell you that the boundary lines are not as clear as the applicant has portrayed them, and I challenge anyone, frankly, to define the boundary line of the right-of-way. And we have conducted a search that goes well back into the 1700s, and in fact, we have determined that there was a path where this right-of-way is located that went from Bronson Road. All indications are that it was a path that led from Bronson Road and actually went where this right-of-way is now. And if you can imagine, it extended through the railroad tracks. The railroad was not there. It extended behind what you may know as the shopping center that has Southport Brewery and the other stores and physicians' offices and the like. It extended behind that, and it went to Southport Harbor. And it was a way of public convenience and necessity. The entire area prior to 1849 was owned by Henry Sturgis. And in 1849, Henry Sturgis conveyed the portion of his property to the New York-New Haven Railroad Company. And in 1849, the railroad tracks were established, and there was a two-track railway that went basically from New York to Boston. And in fact, I have, and I will submit for the record, and I haven't duplicated this because it can't really be duplicated, some records that are, I believe, from the engineering department originally. And Mr. Fallon may have it, but it reflects a conveyance on June 17th of 1847 from Henry Sturgis to Lacey's Crossing. And basically what this does is it's a schedule of title of all the properties that were conveyed to create the railroad. And I don't know how I can show the commission and the public this, but I will tell you that there's a dotted line, and you can barely make it out, but it's called Old Road. And the Old Road is located in the approximate location of the right-of-way that I'll describe with respect to this application.
This is the right-of-way, that's the town right-of-way.
It is the town right-of-way, but at the time, in 1849, it was described as Old Road.
Right.
So in 1849, it was old already. So I want to submit that for the record.
Which means now it's really, really,
Really old. So there was a two-track railroad, and all indications are that it was on grade. So it didn't prevent the public from passing and repassing to the south over the railroad tracks with horses or walking or whatever it was going to be. And that stayed that way until 1890, when Henrietta Sturgis made a conveyance to the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, and a four-lane railway, that's more or less, four-track railway rather, was created, elevated at places, which is sort of what you see today and what we use today for Metro North, and that's in its current form. Since 1950, for 40 or 50 years, quote unquote, Laura Pooley, the town engineer, reports that the town has included what I will call Old Highway, and that's the portion between the railroad tracks and Bronson Road, this right-of-way, in its list reported to the state of unimproved local roads. So it's shown, I think, until about 2 years ago as an unimproved local road. Just a few years ago, the town paved it in its current form, to the extent that it is paved. There are highway drainage structures beneath it. There are no recorded easements with respect to the town's work, maintenance, and repairs. Whatever the town has done, the town didn't acquire any easements to do the work, which further supports the notion that it's a town road.
Meaning that in order to gain access to the road, they didn't require any easements over others' properties?
If it was considered to be anything other than a right-of-way of the town,
got it,
then in order to perform
there was no
work
right-of-way
on it,
required, it was a town road.
it's a town road, or a right-of-way, a town road. I'm told by my searcher that many of the notes back then referred to the highway, and it was called a highway because they would raise up the road so it wouldn't become so muddy, and it was higher and would drain off a little bit. But be that as it may, it was referred to as the old highway. It's referred to as the old road on the document that I produced for the commission, and it is a town road. To further support the notion that it's a town road, 13A49 of the Connecticut General Statutes provides the basis upon which a road can be discontinued when a town wants a road to not be a road anymore of the town. basically, and I'm going to just submit a copy to the commission.
Yeah, of the statute?
13A49, and it says, in relevant part, in the beginning, it says, "The selectmen of any town may, subject to approval by a majority vote at any regular or special town meeting, by a writing signed by them, discontinue any highway or private way or land dedicated as such." So basically, 13A49 describes the method of discontinuing town roads, and I want to submit that to the commission.
So the argument is that the first selectman has not decommissioned the road, and therefore it continues to be a town road.
Well, in fact, in 1969, the town formally abandoned a portion. The southerly portion that's on the other side of the tracks, a portion of that was abandoned, and I have the minutes of the RTM from August 25th, 1969, and at that time there is a resolution, and it's called Discontinuance of Extended Right-of-Way known as Old Highway, formerly Lacey's Crossing. And there are references to a resolution duly moved and seconded. Mr. Sullivan remarked that this road leads to the piece of property deeded to the town by Lacey family, and abandon of it would allow for development of a piece of property situated at the junction of the railroad where you turn off to approach Southport, where the Yankee Peddler used to be. So as part of developing where the Southport Brewing Company the town actually abandoned a portion of, again, the public way that used to go from Bronson Road to Southport before the railroad was installed, therefore making that travel way impossible. So I want to just put these minutes into the record. So once again, that further demonstrates that this was a public way because it was connected to that portion of the road that we're dealing with tonight, and it was formally discontinued rather, pursuant to 13A 49.
Is there any map associated with the minutes?
No, I don't have a map of that, but there is, interestingly, the deed into Irwin, from which Garden Homes plans to acquire a portion of the site at volume 608-898. I have a copy of that. For the commission. And interestingly, the Irwin property that is part of this application says that it's bounded to the southwest by a pent road.
By what?
By a pent road, 117 feet more or less. A pent road is a road that becomes pent. And this road became a pent road by virtue of the installation of an elevated, the railroad that you could not travel on it anymore. It became a pent road. And in fact, the Irwin deed that's part of this application references the pent road as its boundary. That's what I would have thought. And there are several maps in the engineering department and in the town clerk's office that further confirm the existence of the pent road. And you should also note that the pent road is not on our grand list of taxable properties in Fairfield, so it's not taxed as being owned by anyone, which further supports the notion that it's a town road. And here it is, and I have a drawing that shows the current location of it, and I have some copies to hand out to the public who I know is interested in seeing some of this. And you'll see, sure. And this comes off the document, the site plan survey that was submitted by the applicant, and I just wanted to highlight for the commission the location of the road in case there's any question. It is described by the applicant as being a 25-foot right-of-way. don't know, were there enough to go around? I don't know if that is.
No, this is, the deed that you submitted, these are copies, right?
Correct.
Separate.
Well, there aren't,
It's
I don't
it's
have.
one page.
I don't,
Deed-
yes, I don't have a copy for everyone on the
No,
commission. I
but
just
there
wanted-
are multiple copies.
Yeah, but,
It's only one page.
so, basically, the document that I'm providing to you shows, the boundary line of the, Penn Road, or the old highway, or this right-of-way.
So this document here, right?
Yes.
This is what you're referring to now, this
Correct.
map? Okay. And this is a recorded map and associated with this deed?
No.
No.
This is the
Explain
site, this is the survey submitted by this applicant in support of this application.
Oh, it's just a copy of something we should have
Yes, this is an
otherwise in our
excerpt
record.
from the larger survey.
Good
And I'm
enough.
just using it to highlight the location of the road for the commission, and I'll tie it into some other issues in a moment.
Good enough, thank you.
So why is this diagram significant? It's significant because right now, and I'm going to call it the road, we can call it the old road. The old road serves 3 homes at the present time. And actually, it serves 4 households. It serves the Connor property, which is the larger portion of the site that's the subject of this application. It serves the Irwin property, and at present, it provides access to a duplex owned by Kovacs on its west side. And,
Yeah, I think that's the rain.
We're going to stay till 12.
we may stay a little longer tonight.
That's pretty amazing.
What's happened with respect to this application is, and this is interesting, Garden Homes has decided, this applicant has decided that it's going to redesign our town road. As part of this 8-30G application, Garden Homes is going to redesign our town road, the old road. And Garden Homes has essentially brushed aside the comments of our town engineer, and I want to submit that 8-30G is, as Attorney Fallon said, liberally construed. It provides a lot of power to a developer. But one thing it doesn't do is it doesn't empower a developer or an applicant to take and redirect our town roads. And it doesn't entitle a developer to modify our standards for town roads and to ignore and basically brush off the standards established by our town engineer. Now, let's talk about Laura Pooley's comments. What did Laura Pooley say? Laura Pooley said that she reviewed her comments from code enforcement, and she clarified and summarized her recommendation. What she says basically is, you can do a bunch of things to achieve your purpose. You can provide a 50-foot wide town right-of-way by increasing the existing right-of-way by 25 feet, as in, let's widen the road. If somehow they want to take the Irwin property, if somehow they could create, they had the geometry or had the setup, they could widen it to a consistent road. They could construct a 30-foot wide paved roadway, meeting the current requirements for roadway construction in a town of Fairfield right-of-way. That way, it would not comprise the safety of the public for a project of this magnitude the way a 20-foot wide driveway does. It then goes on, you could seek abandonment, discontinue the right-of-way, approach the town, approach the Board of Selectmen, approach the RTM, and have the road discontinued, just like we did in 1969. Discontinue it as a town road. And the Connecticut General Statutes has provisions for that, and what happens in that event. And that's another option. And then, or she says, you can provide a 24-foot wide driveway. I mean, basically, the town engineer provides a series of options, but one thing's for sure, what's proposed is not acceptable to the town engineer. And let's talk about what
Do you believe that Ms. Pooley considered the highlighted area here to be town right-of-way?
Oh, I know she does. I know she does.
Right.
Because discussed it with her, and she provided much of the information, well, the engineering department did.
Right.
And in fact, the town is, they maintain that it is a right-of-way, a road. And I'm using the phrase right-of-way, and you'll pardon me, these phrases, highway, road, right-of-way, are used in different contexts, but they refer to a way of public convenience and necessity to pass and repass that's established, and it provides certain rights.
Got a question.
But it's a town road.
Commissioner Calabrese.
This being a town road, did the town pave that road?
The town paved the road.
Does the town maintain that road as far as plowing, snow removal?
The town does not presently plow the road, and that's because there was a discussion with the residents, and the residents wanted it to be improved. The town did not initially want to pave it, and the town ultimately agreed to pave it and said, you know, you can plow it. But I think the town, frankly, and I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into the history, I have suggested that I'm not 100% clear that this accurately reflects the boundaries of the road, because what really happened, in my mind, having reviewed a lot of documents, is this present configuration was something that was on the map created by the state of Connecticut when I-95 was created. And I don't understand how some engineer in Hartford in the 50s came up with the notion of creating a neat box for this road, when in reality, from the 1700s and earlier, it was used for horses, for walking, and the boundaries were never formally established. And it's unclear to me how even this applicant came up with the notion of sort of certifying that it's a 25-foot right-of-way, but I accept it. This is what the applicant has filed, and this is what the engineering department considers to be a town road.
Right. I mean, you don't have any evidence to support an argument that it's not a 25-foot box the way it's depicted here. To be fair,
I would suggest that there is no deed from the original owners in 1749. There is no deed that establishes a conveyance. There is no original survey that establishes a conveyance of a 25-foot right-of-way. And the first indication that I ever saw of a 25-foot right-of-way was on a Connecticut state highway map that was created as part of the creation of I-95. At the time of the taking, the state, at one point or another, there's some record of the state saying to the town, you take over the maintenance of this. We're basically not going to use it for the highway. We're going to turn it over to the town. This map was repeated. As is the case frequently, documents are used and reused, and somebody looking at the engineering record saw it, and it got momentum, and this is what it looks like today.
well, is that not a common occurrence when there is a governmental taking and they say we're going to look at this big swath for whatever highway, railroad, or whatnot, and at the end of the day they basically give back?
Okay, now we are going to get into, unfortunately, this is going to get a little longer, but I'm going to answer your question.
Well, I would expect nothing less.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. As a couple lawyers in this room will confirm, there are two ways that roads are created, and primarily there's the notion of dedication and acceptance. Now, let me see if I can capsulize this. In Connecticut, at one time, all the property was owned, and there were no roads. And what happened was there were these ways of public convenience and necessity where a path became a wider path. Horses started using it, it became a wider path. Carts and buggies started using it, it became a wider path. They invented the automobile and decided they had to pave it, and so forth. And there were these sort of traditional boundaries that were created for roads, and they were formalized in some way. That's one way that they're created. Then there's the notion of formal dedication, where you've seen so many subdivisions in this town, where now applicants come in for a subdivision, and I think they may deed, actually, the roadway to the town. And it's not, and so that's sort of a formal acceptance procedure. There's an interesting argument that I have with my neighbors sometimes where I assure them that they own to the center line of our road, and they look at me and scratch their head, and I explain to them that our properties are subject to a right of the public to pass and repass and the right of our town to maintain the road. And if the town were to formally discontinue, then the title would revert to the center line of the road. I would own to the center line on my side. My neighbors would own to the center line on the other side. But I'm suggesting that it's not so clear, other than seeing the state highway map when some state engineer dealing with the entire length of I-95 decided to create kind of a boxy diagram. So that's just my point. And by the way, there is a statute that I left on my desk that entitles any owner abutting property to apply to the Board of Selectmen to seek a definition of the boundaries of a town road, to seek a formal definition by the Board of Selectmen, and there's an appeal process to the Superior Court if you're dissatisfied, and it is frankly a process that I've looked at with respect to this application.
But that has not happened
No,
either
no.
by you or by any of the owners here?
No,
or
it's
anything?
just something that I considered in advising.
Now, isn't there generally a doctrine under which if this existed as it does on these maps for successive transfers and over a period of 25 or 50 years, that it is established by prescription, basically? That those who have taken and redeeded and transferred the land in accordance with these maps have essentially acquiesced to the metes and bounds and definitions as they're shown in the maps?
Well, yes, so there is a law on prescriptive rights, but generally prescriptive rights define rights between private parties and private owners of land. I think that you raise a good point. This really relates to sort of long-term public use. And you may raise a very valid point that would support the notion that this is now the town road by virtue of, for over 60 years now, it's kind of looked this way. Nobody has come forward and said it doesn't look this way, and I'm the only one I'm the only one creating a problem here tonight, I
Well,
guess.
Kovacs never came in and said, hold on a second, town, what are you doing paving my land?
That's
Or,
correct.
That's
correct. And Irwin didn't either. I'm not aware of any record of that. And now you lead to the problem. The problem is what Garden Homes proposes to do now.
Mr. Green, if I may, before you get
sorry, I
started.
forgot
No
to-
problem. What you said before regarding Laura Pooley and regarding the regulations that we have as far as roadway goes, which brings up a question that I brought last night to Attorney Fallon, his contention is that in an 830G application, those rules don't apply.
I'm sorry?
The rules of our regulations and according to what Laura Pooley said regarding a 24-foot road do not apply in an 830G application.
I think that what Mr. Fallon is saying is that the subdivision regulations and any zoning regulations that would be applicable are superseded by the intent and purpose of 8-30G. I would, however, suggest that no one is better qualified in our town to prescribe what is reasonable and necessary for the design of a road than our appointed town engineer. And so I would suggest that the fact that the subdivision regulations are not, and once again, the subdivision regulations and our zoning regulations don't dictate this application. But I do believe that they dictate what is just, fair, and reasonable, but that's...
Right, I mean, there's certainly an argument to be made that, the reason that our zoning regulations require a roadway to be 12 foot in each direction is because that's what has been deemed to be safe.
Correct.
And that departing from that one might argue, would lead to an unsafe condition. So while the zoning regulations don't explicitly apply, there is an argument to be made that,
That's correct.
that's the standard for safety.
And I would suggest, once again, that our town, I'm sorry.
But that would be with regard to private land, would it not? And if I'm are you making the argument that because this is a town road, that it is outside the bounds of 830G? that they cannot change or alter a town road in order to, under
Make
the
a private
auspices
driveway.
Well,
of
you keep
830G?
leading me to the next step of my presentation. I
Okay.
would suggest that the applicant cannot dictate to the town or alter a town road that's in the town right-of-way for its benefit.
And I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No,
I
no,
apologize.
the ball is teed up, and I'm ready to go.
But I'm just trying to follow where we're going here.
I'm going to show you.
Okay.
This drawing shows what Garden Homes is proposing. And I have copies for, I think I gave enough of them, several copies, and I have enough for everyone on the commission. Did everyone get one? So just for the edification of the public, hopefully there's enough to go around, but what Garden Homes is proposing, and you'll see the road that is proposed, which is the dark black line. I've superimposed a black line over the curb that they are going to create. They're going to create a curb and drainage structures. And you see the curb, and there's a big bend. You see the big bend that they've created that extends. You will recognize the yellow portion is the town road that I described for you that exists today. The orange area is a so-called limit of ingress and egress easement for Kovacs and Metro North. And they've created that big bend because they recognize the need for larger fire safety vehicles, better traffic flow and circulation, and they've created the road that bends with that gentle bend. Now, interestingly, the orange area, once again, is an ingress and egress easement for Kovacs and Metro North, because as you can see, the town road where Kovacs enters it becomes so narrow that they can't back out of their property. The tenants there or occupants of that duplex now have to back on to the orange area to come off of their property and out of their property. And in order to safely drive off, they have to drive into the orange portion that's shown on this site plan. Now, why is that interesting?
In order to do what? Meaning what? They have to back out so that they can pull out frontways?
Well, they back out and they back, as I understand it, they, under either scenario, as I understand it, they pull in and they pull forward into the site, and when they come off the site presently, they back into the right-of-way and drive towards Bronson Road.
Right, okay. Go ahead.
So the applicant proposes an ingress and egress easement to accommodate that travel, and also so that Kovac can safely travel on this road and stay to the right, particularly when cars are entering the site, they have to stay to the right, so a portion of their use will be in these access easement.
Got it.
Are we clear on that?
I think so.
So what's the problem?
So that a portion of the Garden Homes property is being dedicated, proposed, being dedicated in an easement which is on a portion of the road to provide ingress and egress to the Kovacs.
The town road is being redirected in part upon the property presently in Irwin.
Right.
That's what's happening. The town road has been moved onto Irwin. The traveled portion is now on the Irwin property, and that's to accommodate the geometry, the desired geometry of the road for the benefit of Garden Homes. So what's the problem? If you look at page 327 and 328 of the documents, the last two pages of the submission to the commission,
327.
last two pages of the package, you'll see there are two documents in there. One document is a consent from Connor that says, I consent to this application. Connor consents to the application. That's page 327.
Yep.
Page 328 says, Attorney Russo, on behalf of Irwin, consents to the application. There is no indication of what Metro North says about this plan. In other words, to move their access to their track or their access east, to create an access easement for their benefit. But equally significantly, there is no indication of consent by Gordon Kovacs, the owner of the property, the Kovac property. And it's shown here as now formally Gordon Kovac. And once again, this is from the grading and utility plan. So what's the significance of that? I spoke to Gordon Kovacs today. He lives in California. He was unaware that we were proceeding with this application tonight. He has not accepted an easement. He has no interest in accepting an easement. He has no interest, nor do his tenants, in using the Irwin property for access to his property. And he hasn't consented to the application. So the point is that ordinarily on applications before this commission, affected property owners all must be part of an application, must sign off on an application. And what you're doing here is you're forcing Kovacs, or indeed Metro North, and going to its track to travel, or what the applicant would have you do, is travel over the Irwin property on an easement. And the easement creates different legal obligations than a town road. And I mean, can you picture your neighbor calling you and saying, we are moving the road in front of your driveway onto our property, and from now on, to get in and out of your property, you're going to have to travel over a portion of my property. And you call your lawyer, and your lawyer says, hey, wait a second. There's a law on easements. It creates different duties and obligations in terms of negligence, in terms of rights. And there's a law on easements in Connecticut that says, for example, that where you use an easement, you have to contribute to the maintenance and repair on an equitable basis. So in other words, if your home is accessed by an easement and you use it, when the road needs to get repaved, or when the road needs to get plowed, or whatever happens, there is law that says that you ordinarily have to contribute your equitable share of using it. So it invokes a series of legal rights, duties, and obligations with an easement. But the point is, this application clearly affects the property right of Mr. Kovacs, because he can no longer travel over the right-of-way, and he's being forced into an easement. And I would submit also that ordinarily owners of properties impacted by applications must consent to them. And there's absolutely no consent by Mr. Kovacs, and certainly I have no idea what Metro North has to say about this.
Okay. So one of the documents that your camp handed up was the letter September 24, 2013, where Mr. Kovacs was provided with written notice?
Correct. When Mr. Kovacs was told, basically, the way it was going to be.
Right. I just perused this in the short time that we've had it, but, you know, one of the things that I found immediately interesting was the statements that they proposed to widen. We could not avoid widening into this area, all of which lies in the public right-of-way. Conversely, as the driveway enters the site, we angled it away from your side yard onto the property of 92 Bronson, so to give you a larger side yard than currently exists.
Yeah, that's great. And Mr. Kovacs would say, gee, that's great. So I'm getting a slightly larger yard if I want it, if I want to maintain it, and if I want that. And for that, I get 95 units using my little right-of-way that I get to share with you. Pardon my... I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't let you finish. I apologize.
All right. I wasn't hammering at you. Are they actually dedicating a portion of property to Mr. Kovacs under this proposal?
First of all, I don't know how Garden Homes, the applicant, decides they're going to do that. But apparently that's the notion. And no, I don't know if that's the notion. I can't honestly, I wouldn't even concede to fully understand what...
No, excuse me, they've actually changed that since this letter.
Yeah, and I think
Oh.
that,
This might have been with regard to an earlier plan?
correct, this
to-
is no longer the geometry.
I see. Okay, because the other thing that struck me was that they spoke to, I'm going to find it now, taking a portion of his grass area.
Yeah.
Are they taking a portion of a grass area
At present, they are,
under the current plan?
yes, it appears that they, I don't know because it's not shown where the grass
Well, we're going to have a
begins.
break. I mean, obviously, you're not going to finish tonight. We're going to break. In between this session and the next session, could you just clarify that point for me? I'd like to understand whether the proposal affects the Kovacs property in any way. If they're taking a portion of the Kovacs property to turn it into some use for this development, or if they're proposing to give over certain land or such.
I don't think that they,
Mr.
no,
Fallon may be able to answer that quickly, but...
I certainly, Mr. Green, certainly may want to opine by email on that since the hearing's going to be open. We'd just like to have the same opportunity. I won't get into it, but we want to clarify.
Oh, yeah, no, of course.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me...
I wouldn't expect anything differently.
It seems to me that the one with the access to the data in the plan, this is from their survey that I just, once again, colored and highlighted the existing survey. It seems to me that it's the applicant that should define.
Well, that's fine. I just want to know what the proposal is.
I don't know.
You know, okay, that's fair enough then.
And
So as between the two of you, somebody can figure it out.
So I would suggest that maybe the applicant can provide that,
All right.
and I'd be happy to respond.
Well, that's fine. If the applicant can provide it between now and the next hearing, then that's great, but I'm not going to go back and forth, you know.
Now,
Okay, thank you.
Let's be clear that the Board of Selectmen has not discontinued any portion of the road since 1969, and certainly no portion of what I'm calling the old road. The town engineer does not adopt this plan based on her comments, clearly, and for many reasons, this road is too narrow. No school bus can enter this site, we will show this evening. So once again, and as you've heard from many of the speakers, school-age children ages K to 12 living there, I suppose, have to walk in the road as it's presently configured to get to Bronson Road. And let's face it, in the wintertime, when the snow is deep, school kids are not going to walk in the snow, they're going to be in the road, and the only safe path is on the traveled portion of the road. And the engineer for the applicant confirmed that there's no sidewalk as at present. It's not on the plan, and there's no way to install a sidewalk at the worst point on this site. And that's at Bronson Road, 25 feet from a highway entrance with rapid speeds, and that's the first portion of the town road that is proposed. I wouldn't let my children or yours or anyone's walk in the road there as the sole means of getting off this site, and I urge you not to permit that as well. For the record, there is a narrow sidewalk on the other side of Bronson Road, and yes, people walk there. I've run there. In fact, a lot of people run there, and particularly in the past when the Fairfield Half Marathon course, which was part of the course till last year, went by it. A lot of people like to run the course, to train for it, and last year they decided to go with a flatter but hotter course instead. Now, Mr. Wab doesn't apparently think that anyone walks here because he hasn't seen anyone. He collected his traffic counts. Now, this is confusing. In his report, he indicates that he collected his traffic counts in January and February, and that's on page 219 of the report. His data seems to be dated February 14th and March 18th, and that begins on page 235. So the report dates and the data dates seem to be different. There are no times indicated, and with just 15-minute samplings at the various locations, I question that. And just to be clear on parking, and I'll talk about site parking later, but there can be no parking in the driveway, and what we're calling the driveway. There can be no parking on the road, the town road, the old road, as I've called it. There is no parking on Bronson Road where the old road enters. where the proposed road exits and enters from Bronson
Have you
Road.
confirmed that? I mean,
Yes.
I asked the officer, the sergeant that was here, and he didn't have a record.
There is no parking there in the road. There is, however, it appears, when I drove through, that there appears to be limited parking, for example, under the overpass. But at that point, under the I-95 overpass.
Under the overpass, around the corner, on Mill Hill?
On Bronson Road.
On Bronson.
It's not posted that you can't park there, so you should be able to park there at your own risk.
That's after you've walked probably over 1,000 feet to get
Right,
there.
the overpass for 95, you're talking about coming out of the proposed site, making a right, walking past the on-ramp,
Across the on-ramp.
and then continuing. Okay.
There's a picture that's been handed to me.
There's a few in there of that.
I'll take a look at this and we'll figure that out.
Are you aware of any signs on the street that purport to regulate parking one way or the other?
There's no signs.
No signs, thank you.
Now, we have commissioned a
Right.
traffic study, and what I think, I'm going to call on David Spear of DLS Traffic Engineering to offer his opinions on traffic and the safety of the site. And I just want to submit to the commission, and I am biased, that you have to weigh the opinions. You've heard from the traffic consultant for the applicant, and you weigh them, and experts offered opinions based on education, training, study, and experience, and the like. And in every lawsuit I've been involved with, there's one expert's wrong, one expert's right, so they've had about 500. And certainly you've had experts before you that you've agreed with, you've disagreed with. But as you listen to this report, and as you consider the report that you heard last night, I would ask that as you weigh, and you will weigh, the validity of these opinions as a matter of common sense, I think you'll find that there's no question that there are so many significant safety issues and hazards presented, just as a matter of common sense. But we will offer the expert testimony that really is required in this instance to establish that as required under the statute. I would like to introduce David Spear of DLS Traffic, who will present his report to you this evening. I can do that.
Attorney Green is handing out my report. Just give you a little background. My name is David Spear. I'm the principal engineer with DLS Traffic Engineering. My office is in Windsor, Connecticut. I've been practicing traffic engineering for about 30 years, and we've been asked to take a look at this application from a traffic and site access point of view. Just to give you an overview of what we had to look at, we reviewed the two plans from the site plan set, the overall site plan and the grading and utility plan. We also looked at the traffic impact study prepared by KWH. I have basically 4 areas for discussion that I want to go through. They're comments related to the traffic impact study, site access and safety issues, internal circulation, and Connecticut DOT related issues. The first topic is the traffic impact study. We reviewed the study. In general, it follows accepted traffic engineering procedures and analyses. However, there were certain problems with the studies that we found, and the first 3 comments in my list, or the first 4 comments, excuse me, pertain to the traffic report. The first issue I had was the trip generation. The KWH report used mid-rise apartments from the ITE manual. The ITE manual includes data from land uses all over the country and from various land uses. It's a 3-volume set, and there's a number of different data points provided. They also suggest that for certain uses, there's not enough data provided that you look at alternative analysis, and that's the case here. Is that the mid-rise apartment ITE database is based on only 7 data points, and those were from the 1980s from Montgomery County, Maryland. It's from one study. They didn't even have enough information to provide the daily traffic. We recommend using the general category of apartment.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
Is there a citation to the IT manual where that's disclosed? Is it a page reference or something?
A page reference to
Well, you're telling me that the ITE estimate is based on 7 data points from 1980s.
Yes, that's in the first set of the data. If you look under mid-rise apartments in the IT manual,
right.
The first page gives you the metadata, the information about the data, and it's on that page.
It's on the first page of the book?
The first page of the land use for mid-rise apartments.
Okay.
Each category has a page describing the land use, what it entails, and what the data included is.
I was just looking for a citation.
I don't have that page handy. I can get it for you. It's in my file.
That would be helpful.
If you'd like it. I have it here. I'll get it for you after.
At some point. That would be helpful.
I'll just get you the page number.
Thank you.
The land use code, we recommended the apartment land use, which is based on 230 studies throughout the U.S. with from the years 2000 and forward. The apartment land use results in trip generation estimate of 50 trips in the morning and 70 trips in the afternoon, which is about twice the estimate provided by the KWH study. So based on that, the second half of their traffic study needs to be updated to include the full amount of site traffic that would be expected from 95 apartments. We believe that the estimate they've provided underestimates the site traffic by about half. The capacity analysis and the tables based on that data should also be updated to include the additional site traffic. The next issue is parking. The parking analysis, the KWH report suggests that 1.2 parking spaces per unit is the appropriate amount of parking for this apartment use. We found that we looked at an alternative reference book called Parking by Robert A. Wendt and Herbert Levinson. Herbert Levinson is the local Connecticut guy. That they recommend 1.5 spaces per unit for design. That 1.5 spaces includes a 10% factor to allow people to find a parking space. If you maximize a parking area and just give them the demand amount, you'll have a case where you only have a few empty spaces available, and you'll have vehicles searching around the site trying to find a space, so that the recommended design amount includes a factor 10% above the demand amount. Based on that 1.5 spaces per unit, we would recommend 143 parking spaces for the site.
Excuse me. In regards, I just saw it here, and I'm trying to find out. You had mentioned that there are also columns in the parking spots, correct? Where did I just see that? 9?
It's on page, right, it's on page 3.
Right, the applicant proposes 24 spaces. These columns will make it difficult to access the subject parking spaces. It is likely that the spaces with columns in them will not be fully utilized. We shall increase the parking shortage on this site. By looking at the site plan and looking at where the columns are, how many parking spots do you think are impeded by this?
I'd have to count the columns up. They're clearly marked at the end of the parking spaces. I think there's about 20 of them, but I'd have to count them to give you an exact number.
Now, according to number 9 in your report, what are you trying to say? You're trying to say it's going to be difficult to get into these spaces, or?
It's difficult to access the spaces, and people tend to shy away from the columns so that they would tend to not park correctly into the space, or they might take like 1.5 spaces, and therefore they wouldn't be able to fully utilize all the spaces.
Excuse me, I have a question also, actually 2 questions. The recommended 1.5 parking spaces per unit does that vary with the size of the unit? Is that also required for efficiencies and 1-bedrooms?
That's based on the apartment use, which includes efficiencies and 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms.
So in other words, it's not flexible to the size of the apartment?
It's not that refined, no.
Okay. Also, back on page 1, you indicated that you recommended using land use 220 instead of land use 223 mid-rise apartments. What is the difference between land use 220 and land use 223? Are they both mid-rises?
Land use 223 is 4 stories to 10 stories. The
I'm sorry, it's more
low-rise
what?
apartments, 4-story building to 10-story building is
4 to 10?
mid-rise. And above 10 is considered a high-rise, and below 4 is considered a low-rise. And the general apartment use includes all apartments, includes low-rise, mid-rise, high-rise, all the whole database, which is
And so then what's land use 220?
that's apartment.
Just all apartments?
All apartments.
All apartments for 4 to 10 stories.
No, all apartments for all stories. It includes low-rise, mid-rise, and high-rise. All apartments are included in the apartment category.
Ah, that's for the trip generation. And then you go to the parking, which is a little bit more refined than that.
No, the parking is just for apartments also, for 1.5 spaces per unit.
Yeah, just a quick, I just want to, Mr. Spear, you also referenced the Fairfield regulations, and you get 285 by multiplying it to 3 spaces. However, just in our regulations, it also gives us the discretion to reduce that by up to 50%, but no less than 1.5. On your report, again, I haven't had a chance to read it all, I'm listening to you. Are you saying that you believe that 1.5 would be your recommended adequate parking ratio for a development of this size?
Well, if you reduce the 285 by 50%, you come up with the 143, which is what we're recommending.
Right. I understand. I see you're recommending 1.5.
Yes.
Okay. And that is, I was just pointing out that that's actually a minimum in our regulations, but it is consistent with our regulations.
But that's more than they're proposing, the 113.
Yes. I just want to get your recommendation as a traffic engineer that you would propose 1.5 for a site of this.
Yes.
The development of this size. Okay. Thank you.
So if I could just ask you a couple of more questions before you get to your next point, because if we're going to walk through this, and I want to, we're not going to finish before 11 by any stretch. And I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions before we leave these data points that we're on. So have you used the KWH manual in prior studies?
KWH is the author of the applicant's traffic study.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
We use ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, trip generation for all our traffic studies. That's
IT. I'm sorry if I got that confused. Applicant used KWH. And you used...
No, the applicant used ITE, they just used a different category in the ITE. than
Different
we did.
category.
KWH is the name of their firm.
Understood, sorry. I was confused. I thought they used ITE.
The ITE has the mid-rise ITE data has a very limited database, and therefore it's not reliable as far as this proposed use. We
So
would
you didn't-
recommend the conservative approach, which is to use the use the apartment.
So you didn't use a different resource, you just went to a different section of the ITE.
Yes, we went to land use 220 as opposed to land use 223
Okay,
from the same document.
Why?
yeah. So...
I explained that.
Yeah, because of the difference in the
land
study.
use 223 has a limited database. They have only 7 data points
Yeah.
from a study in 1980 from Maryland.
Is it in your experience, is there ever a reason to use land use 223 given the shortcomings of the data?
I wouldn't recommend using it. I think it's inappropriate, and it's not conservative, and it's not based on enough data to provide adequate information. The one thing I didn't mention about our apartment land use is they give you an estimate for the daily traffic, which the daily traffic is not even provided in the mid-rise apartment use. And the daily traffic is 700 trips per day.
How many trips per day?
700. That's 350 entering and 350 exiting, based on 95 units, based on the apartment land use.
Right. So the applicant's traffic engineer, Mr. Hua, suggested that this facility would generate less than, and then in one part he kind of waffled and said maybe around 400 trips per day. You're suggesting that it's 2 times that amount. Not suggesting,
I'm just
you
saying
are
that's what-
opining
that's
that
what
it
the
is 2
data-
times the amount.
That's what the data shows from the apartment use, the general apartment use, which is a broader category than the mid-rise apartment is a very specific type of apartment. It's between the 4 and the 10 floors.
Right.
And the broader category gives you a much conservative, it's based on much more data. It's based on data from across the country, more recent data, and it gives you a more conservative estimate of the traffic from apartments.
And so you can take that data and then apply that to a 95 unit complex and come out with an opinion on how many trips per day this site is going to generate.
Yes.
And your opinion is that it will generate how many trips per day?
700 trips per day. And that's not just my opinion, that's just what the equation tells you. My opinion is that you should use the apartment use instead of the mid-rise apartment use.
And when you do, your
And when you
opinion is
use that, it comes out to 700
Okay.
when you run the numbers.
Right. Okay. Then just in moving back to the parking, in your paragraph number 3 on page 2, you make the statement at the very end, the last sentence, there is no parking on Bronson Road. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you tell me what's your basis for making that statement?
Well, that's based on my site visit. There's no parking. It's a arterial road with although it's posted at 25 miles an hour, I believe the applicant study determined it was 38 miles per hour, and it's designed as a road which you would not park on.
So is it your opinion then that even though there are no signs posted on Bronson Road in the area adjacent to the proposed property here, it would be unsafe for cars to park on Bronson Road?
Yes, that's my opinion is if you started parking on Bronson Road, that the police department would get out there and put no parking signs up. If you started getting vehicles parked out there.
Thank you. So before we start another subject, does anyone else have any other questions on this up to this point in the report? No? All right.
Okay, just the last issue I had on the traffic study was the lack of the accident history. There was no accident data provided in the KWH report. We obtained accident data from the DOT for the latest 3-year history from 2010 to 2012, and there were 7 accidents. They're primarily on the entrance ramp at Bronson Road, and there was 1 fixed object, 2 rear ends, and 4 side swipes. And based on the proposed geometry and the proximity of the driveway to the entrance ramp, I would expect that the additional amount of site traffic would increase the potential for more side swipes and more rear ends due to the site traffic. Do you want me to continue? I've got
We have a couple of pages left here.
I've got about a page and a half left.
How much, I mean...
Probably 5 minutes.
5 or 10 minutes?
5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, well, let's see how far we can get and see what questions we have.
Okay, the site access and safety issues, item number 5. The left turns from Bronson Road into the site and into the entrance ramp happen in about a 25-foot space. They're basically going to take the same portion of Bronson Road for somebody turning left into the site drive or turning left into the entrance ramp. I ran what's called the Harmelink charts, which are a warrant for left turn treatment for unsignalized intersections at the intersection of Bronson Road and the driveway and the entrance ramp. And based on the volumes and the speeds and the percentage of left turns, there's nomographs that tell you whether or not you need to provide a left turn treatment. In this case, the speeds were high enough and the volumes were high enough and the percentage of left turns were high enough that it warrants a left turn treatment.
On the pavement?
On Bronson Road.
You mean like a left turning lane? What do you mean by left turn
treatment?
treatment?
Left turn treatment could be one of 2 things. The DOT usually requires what they call a bypass area, which is a 20-foot half section.
Yeah.
It's a wide shoulder.
So that people can get around.
Exactly, so people can go around somebody turning left. So in order to address that issue, you'd either have to widen the road and put in a bypass area or put in a left turn lane to have a left turn slot for the driveway and for the ramp to 95.
So based on your observations and your investigation, do you think that that the proposal as submitted is unsafe unless Bronson Road is widened?
Yes. The analysis shows that you're going to create rear-end accidents, and that with the speeds that are out there and the volumes and the amount of left turns, you need an alternative. Rather, you need the ability to go around the left turner as opposed to going into the left turner and creating an accident.
So are you expecting a queue?
Yes, there would be a queue. The through traffic, well, if you provide the left turn bypass area, there won't be a queue because you'll go around the left turning vehicle. But if you don't, you're going to queue up through traffic behind the left turners. Number 6 in the comments.
Have you ever seen a 95-unit residential building, 25 feet, an entrance to a 95-unit residential building 25 feet from an on-ramp of an interstate?
No.
With a bus stop.
If the state had any control over intersections adjacent to their ramp, they wouldn't allow it. They've got a non-access line, which I'll get to in a minute. But we did run this by the state. We sent a copy of the plans over to the OSTA office, which is the Office of the State Traffic Administration.
Right.
Because it falls under the major traffic generator. It's under 100,000 square feet and it's under 200 parking spaces. So it's not under their purview But when we first looked at it, we saw some adjacent connections to adjacent properties, and we weren't sure what those properties were. So we thought it might throw it into their venue. But anyway, they looked at it and they had a few comments, which I'll get to at the end.
Didn't I see somewhere in the packet that one of the recommendations from the code review was that the traffic study be reviewed by the state? Yeah, right? I think so. Sorry, please continue.
Okay, the proximity of the driveway to the entrance ramp is an issue as far as safety goes. Right now, there's just a handful of cars, the traffic is negligible coming out of the driveway. But when you add the site traffic in, you'll have people turning right into the driveway and people going down and turning right onto the ramps. The problem is the speed differentiation, because the people turning right into the driveway will be slowing and stopping to turn, and the people turning right onto the ramps are accelerating to try to get up to the highway speed. So you've got two conflicting speeds, one going towards the ramp and one going towards the driveway. That's gonna...
I'm sorry, may I speak to? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to suggest that I've spoken to Mr. Spear. As I understand it, the next night for this would be, is it going to be?
So we had discussed during the break Tuesday the 15th, correct?
And it occurs to me that there's some issues that I'm going to want to raise with Mr. Spear as well, and I somehow think that it may make sense, and we don't have to do it at this moment, but break at some appropriate moment.
Well,
Mr. Spear
you know,
is available.
you kind of got my sense earlier, and you know our practice.
I do.
It's been a long day for everybody. We all have day jobs.
And yesterday was too. So.
Yeah, and you know, it's after 11.
And I respect that.
This is very important.
I agree.
I don't want to rush this. I also just received this report, and I'm reading it on the fly, and I'm asking questions as they occur to me on the fly. I kind of like to take a look at it.
And I fully respect that, and what I would suggest then is that maybe at this moment we postpone, we conclude here and pick up on Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
Is he available to come on the 15th?
He is.
You'll be here on the 15th. Very good. In the meantime, could you please submit a copy of your resume, your curriculum vitae, or some substantiation of his experience, please?
Yes.
Okay? Very good. We obviously haven't finished here tonight, and we're going to need another day. Hopefully we'll finish in one more session. We will reconvene the hearing next Tuesday, the 15th, 7:30 p.m. Here.